Good evening. I'd like to open the 13th meeting of fiscal year 2020 of the Milton Planning Board and say Happy New Year, calendar New Year to everyone. I'm Cheryl Tagayas, the chair.
Denny Swinson, secretary.
Julia Gavin-Burke.
William Clark, Planning Director.
Allison Quinn, Assistant Planner.
April Anderson, member.
Kathleen O'Donnell, member.
Okay, so we're going to adjust the order of our agenda a little bit tonight because we have a guest with us who is on a tight time schedule, and we started our meeting a little early to help accommodate that. So we'll come back to administrative items and citizen speak, and we're going to go directly to, under number 4, new business, the East Milton outreach to stakeholders, pre-second meeting update with Judy Barrett. Welcome, Judy.
Thank you so much, and thank you for accommodating my schedule tonight. I'm sorry to drag everybody here a little bit early. I think the plan tonight was to talk about what we want to accomplish at the next meeting and get some direction from you folks. So we've all talked as a team since the last meeting, and Dodson Flinker kind of pulled together a little bit of a summary of the visual preference results from people, and I don't think there's any surprises from them at all. Well, actually, but there's a logic to the way those responses organized. There was, of the people who participated in the meeting, there was a pretty favorable response to structures that did not look like West Concord. I can't tell you how many communities I work in where people say, I want to look like West Concord. That sort of cute is not what people responded to well here. They did respond to kind of a 2.5, 3-story structure that looked like it was in a more urban setting than some of the buildings that were of a similar height, but in either a linear type of development, so it looked new, which is not really the way I think people think about East Milton Square. It's, you know, a pretty established area. And then things that just didn't really, even though the architecture might be pretty to some people, just didn't quite fit, I think, people's image of this area. So we actually thought that a lot of the responses made sense if you were thinking about what informs the perspective of someone who lives in the area. So we found it helpful. But I think that, you know, the question that we wrestled with coming out of that meeting is, it seemed to us that people who attended feel like they've been to a lot of meetings and they've been asked for a lot of input, and what they really would like to know is they want some information. You know, I think that's kind of what we heard. So we were thinking in this next meeting that we might come back with, here's what we heard, here's what we heard you guys say, and here are some case studies that we've identified of areas that have crazy traffic, which you do here. We're not even going to deny that. How does redevelopment happen in an area like this? And what does the market seem to be doing in this part of the Boston area? Because I think that there needs to be a bit of a reality check here on what is it the developer needs to make a deal work in this kind of environment. So we were going to come back with both some visual examples that are responsive to what came out of the visual preference survey, that perhaps involved development that had to deal with some kind of significant traffic mitigation, but then also be able to talk a little bit about numbers. So at least people know when they don't like something that looks very big to them, that, you know, it may be developer greed, but it may also be because in order to make something work here and meet all the asks that a community wants, whether it's subgrade parking or whatever, there has to be a certain amount of stuff that is built into the project. And so at least people have that information. And that's kind of what we thought we would do in that second meeting, was to go back and say, we heard you said you wanted information. Here's some stuff to think about as a neighborhood and as a town. Does that make sense to you?
I think that would be great.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I think that's right. People have had meetings and meetings and meetings, and
Yeah.
they'd like to see what.
With your graphic team, you know, the visualization team that you have, one of the things I think would be beneficial is if you, you know, sometimes I think people have associations with height or density that have more to do with how something is either presented or designed than, than the underlying kind of numbers around it.
Yep.
So I was wondering if you could kind of look at that, you know, like if you took, you know, like a section down a street and you said, okay, well, here's a 3-story building or a 2-story or a 4-story, and you kind of said if it's on the sidewalk, it's, what is that perceived to be? And if it's set back, what is that perceived to be? And if you set it back after the second floor, what
Right.
are your, what's it
Recessed
like on the
facade.
street, kind of what?
Right.
And so it's a little bit more about, what's the
Form and
public-
massing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it
Okay.
doesn't have to be, East Milton per se, but if it had something similar characteristics, like the same kind of sidewalk width and roadway width and parking spaces next to it, just to
Sure.
kind of help visualize, because that's some of what I've seen as I've been on the planning board, but also as an architect.
I bet you have.
Just
Yeah.
how things are explained and visualized
Right.
can make a big difference.
Yep. No, I completely agree, and I think we certainly can do that.
Okay. Other suggestions or comments, folks?
No, I appreciate the feedback. I feel like you read that room pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I almost felt badly for them, because you come in as the consultants, right? And you think you kind of know what you're going to do, and you have to sort of find out, right? That actually these poor people they want information. somebody said at the meeting, we just want to know what can be done, or
Right.
what,
Yeah.
and I thought that's a fair question, and I don't know if you're going to like the answer, but I can come back and try to give you some feedback.
No, but I think it's easier for people to respond to something than to be asked, what do you want to see? I mean, it's
Yeah.
sort of an
Right.
open-ended question.
Yeah.
And especially if you don't work in that world, it's hard to
Sure.
even think about what's possible.
Right.
So I think this will be very informative, and I think it will help guide the next step.
Yeah.
And the other thing I think that a lot of people have asked about is, what's an appropriate level of parking for a certain kind of development in a certain kind of location, right? So if you had any other data from any other place that could be useful for that discussion, I think that would be helpful.
I'm smiling because this is my world, is this,
Right.
these parking requirements. And, in very more suburban locations, this happens to be an issue with a project in Framingham I was just involved with yesterday, and what the town thinks it needs and what the applicant thinks it needs are kind of far apart. But the applicant also does a lot of very urban work, and there's no public transportation right by the site. So I'm not saying 2 spaces per unit makes sense, but it's probably not 0.7 either. So I think really context is just terribly important. And I don't know the answer here. I mean, part of what I wondered, and I don't know if there's anything that is useful, but I know Beta Group's doing some work here, and I wondered, is there anything coming out of that study that might be helpful to this?
I think it will be, but I don't know how far along they are yet, not far enough.
Not far
along.
enough?
Not far enough.
Okay, all right.
There was a parking utilization study done in 2015, and I think Bill may have given you a copy of that.
I don't think I had that.
MAPC and staff did
Okay.
that.
Oh, look, maybe you did.
And that might be useful
Okay.
to take a look
Yeah,
at.
definitely. I think that would be.
Okay,
Because we don't need to recreate, data that, it might need to be updated somewhat, but the locations of all the places are, one thing that you should know is that there was a recent decision made by the select board to do on a trial basis, make all of the curbside parking 2-hour in East Milton Square,
oh, really?
except for, was it 3 spaces or 4, Bill, that are 15-minute?
There's 2 or 3 spaces in front of Mr. Jan's that are 15 minutes from 5 to 9.
All right, but everything else, so if you see in that study, you may see 1 hour and 30 minutes and 2 hours and 15. That's not the way it is now for this
Okay.
trial period.
Okay.
It is something that we think as a board should be studied
Okay.
as part of our analysis, but
Sure.
there was an interest from the merchants, at least to try this out, and from the Chamber of Commerce, so that they went forward with that, but they also are interested to see what comes of our study. So
I'm
that
sorry.
might be from some market analysis piece, like, okay, if a retailer were interested in that location. So, I mean, I don't know how much of this you have the expertise in, or if you have some suggestions, but certainly something we're all interested in, I think,
Right.
is, everybody, if you ask them, what would you like to see in Milton? People would say, well, we have a lot of hairstylist places, we have dry cleaners, we have,
Real estate agents.
real estate agents, but we don't have, in some places, we don't have coffee shops. East Milton, we do, but, we may not have a shop, so what is it that, is it even possible to get like a boutique type shop? Well, there's a gift shop above the fruit center. Is it because people can go and do 3 or 4 things in one building? Just kind of an understanding of
We
what
can
is
certainly-
local retail,
We can
what
address
makes
that.
it work,
I think we
right?
can, we can
Okay.
certainly speak to that, yes.
And how do we get the right mix, get a little more variety? What are they looking for? Is there anything in our zoning that we can do, or in our planning, that kind of helps draw the kind of businesses people said they want to see, right?
Right, right.
Yes, Rich?
I have a question.
Sure.
So I'm going to I'll give you some context, and I think there's a question in here for you. So in East Milton Square, there's like a history of not a lot, and not to offend anybody that's listening, but there's not a lot of enforcement on parking and just traffic. And so you find that people just park everywhere. And it's kind of chaotic. And I feel like that adds to some of the feeling of there's just so much going on. Well, because you've got big box trucks parked in a street that you can't even get down, or you've got two 18-wheelers next to each other and I can't squeeze past them. Or just on the way here today, I saw 4 cars parked completely illegal, so you can't get around them when other people are coming this way.
I get it.
And so I guess my question is because there's been so many years of just not enforcing, and I don't even know if we have the ability to enforce to the level that would change people's habits quickly. My question is, how do towns deal with that when they're trying to revitalize a neighborhood, an area like this business district, but it has this known issue of just, there is parking, right? So,
Parking management.
yeah, there's just no parking management, there's illegal parking, there's signs that are confusing, there's just not a lot of well-defined
For
lines.
everybody's information, we did add to Beta's scope of work, is this what you were going to say, Bill? Or no. To include analysis of loading.
Truck loading.
And truck, like if there should be a loading zone,
Right.
if there should be hours, how to manage it, because this is something that communities are looking at in other places as
Oh, yeah.
well. There's data about that. So maybe that's something we could have some conversation with Beta about, and if there's anything that you can help Beta with on that.
It's
Bill?
one of the steps. Obviously, you haven't been driving in the square, you've been walking it, because we do have an enforcement person. We have a 20-hour-a-week enforcement person who has given out several hundred tickets already.
Yeah.
Oh my
Since
gosh.
he's been hired.
That's fine, but
trucks
it's
too?
like coming here today. I did drive and stop at East Milton Square because I had to get something, and I didn't want to walk back home and get my car.
Late this afternoon, right?
Just on the way here.
Yeah.
It's usually at night or later in the day, but
Yeah.
there still is. It's going to fix it long-term, I think, as people start getting a ticket and irritated that they get a ticket. But at the end of the day, they're not giving out tickets every day, and they're not giving out tickets throughout the day. And there isn't like a police officer stopping and saying, hey, keep going, like you see in some neighborhoods or some towns. And so there isn't an amazing...
Parking enforcement.
There's a new thing now where there's U-turns, right? Because people have to go completely around the square to go in another direction. Now there's a ton of U-turns in front of Abbey Park every day. There's constant U-turns right in the middle
So
of the
it's
road.
dangerous right there too.
Very dangerous.
Yes, Danny.
I didn't want to cut you
No,
off.
I'm done. I guess to summarize, if you're looking at this stuff and you're seeing I guess my question is what do other people do? Because we can't be the only ones with this issue.
Right. Well, you could do the radical thing that Plymouth did, which was to create an EDIC and give the entire public parking supply over to the EDIC to manage, so they could eventually build a parking garage, which they have just done. And so the town got out of the enforcement business, got out of the parking management business, and basically said, you go fix this problem. So the EDIC sells parking permits for residents and non-residents and manages the various lots, and enforcement is a key piece of that. But it's also, it's of course a larger area than what we're talking about here too, but the pricing of the parking is an important piece of this. It's not just having meters, not just time that you park, but what does it cost?
We have no meters.
Well, I understand. So this is like, how do you then manage the park? You can't, I'm sorry. I mean, there's a bigger conversation here, and unfortunately, people who are really affected by the parking constraints, who live there or live nearby and want to stop, they don't want the inconvenience of meters either. But if you want to manage the supply, it has to cost something. That's a blunt answer. I'm not saying you need an EDIC, but the logic of it's a supply, right? And if it's going to be used in a way that's efficient, it has to be priced.
But in that traffic study that we just got from the Chamber of Commerce, to set up charging costs a lot of money.
Yes, it does. It
So
does.
it's a thing that you would invest in 4 years, you'd break even maybe? I don't know.
That's
I'm asking
yeah.
because I don't know if it's a long-term.
I just like the idea of a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I think it's fine. I mean, it is certainly something we can address, I just don't know if people will like the answer, but.
No, I'm sure
Yeah.
nobody's going to be happy with this, with what I'm saying right now, because at the end of the day, I wouldn't want a ticket either, but I will tell you, I don't, because I live there, I do not park illegally because it bothers me so bad, because I see kids running across the street, then you
Yeah.
can't see around those
Scary.
cars, it's
Right.
scary.
It is
Yeah.
scary.
Well, one of the other things, well, first of all, any other suggestions of things you'd like
Oh,
to
I
do?
was
Sure,
just
sorry,
going
Danny.
to say that when I go to East Milton during the day, I pretty much know where to park. So if I can't park here, I go to the next spot, the next spot, the next spot, and I kind of know the drill. But when I'm going to a restaurant at night, I never know what to do because I
park
don't
in my
live there. Okay, that's good. But that's really good to know because I end up driving around for 20 minutes going, I don't want to bother the neighborhood, but I don't know where to go. So I think for somebody out of town that wants to use the business, or from somebody from across town that just wants to go do something, there's a big loss on what to do, especially at night. So I don't know if it's signage, I don't know what the solution is, but I think it's kind of like, I don't know, it's just
Well,
like a crab shell game.
I did have a conversation with a member of the Chamber of Commerce and spoke about how in some communities, the chambers are actually very active. Like they might print a map and they show where the
Wayfinding.
parking is,
Yeah.
right? And where, what hours are and things like that. Because sometimes it's their customers don't know where to go.
Right.
The businesses can direct them. Like some of the restaurants, they have parking arrangements, but if their customers aren't aware of where those arrangements
Right.
are, then they're not going to go to there.
Right.
So that it is the businesses need to participate in building that awareness too.
Right.
So I think that's something if we as we talk to the chamber in a partnership way here to help engage them into thinking what they may be able to help with.
Do you have an active chamber here?
Yes.
Okay.
And then there's a member on the steering committee from the chamber. I've forgotten.
Travis? Is that
Is
it?
that Paul?
think
It's
so.
Paul? Okay. He's a business owner in East Milton Square.
Yeah, because sorry to jump in,
No,
but
go ahead.
if the business owners are trying to tell the deliveries where to park, because now we've given them a new place, and they're telling their clients or customers where to park, or their own employees.
Their own
Imagine how many
employees are a
people
big
work
part
in the
of it.
square and drive there, if they all just park somewhere else, maybe they even have more spots, but I guess if they're having an issue, I mean, I'd like to hear from them what's not working about it so we can change it. Because
Right.
at the end of the day, we don't want to, ram it home and try to get them to do something that'll never work.
No, I mean, that, I think that member asked me to whether I'd be willing to come to a chamber meeting. It was on January 2nd. I was unavailable, but I asked if Bill or Allison could go. Allison went. Thank you, Allison.
Awesome.
So we want to continue that outreach, so we have a
Yeah.
dialogue that they can
They
participate.
have really good
in.
lunches, so I'll go next week.
Okay, great. So, maybe we can roll that into the next discussion, too. The other thing I wanted to touch on a little bit, Judy, is after that second meeting, what do you think what do you envision would be helpful for moving forward beyond that?
Well, if we stay with our current scope, the plan is to go back to a third meeting with sort of almost like a representation, illustration, visualization of what we heard people say that they would like to see. My only concern about that is I think we can do that, but I'm not sure how grounded in market reality it's going to be. And so if we're feeding back to people, this is what people said they could live with. We probably could do that. If
then
we
it
can get
gives
enough
false
input out
hope.
of this, if we can get enough input out of the second meeting to get some consensus on some things.
And if we can't, you had some other thoughts. Do you want
Yeah.
to just kind of give us an overview
Sure.
of those?
So we've been working with Littleton on one of the mass housing grants and around development around their train station. And I realized after about 2 months on that project that unless we had a working group to kind of steer this thing, it was not going to go anywhere because people were tired of hearing about housing. But they have a train station, it's a suburban train station, and the MBTA has identified that as one of their growth stations. So the town created this working group to try to work out literally what are the issues that people are concerned about and how might we accommodate those, and to what extent do we need to provide some public education for people to understand why we're talking about 40R density in some locations, or why housing next to the train station might actually make things better there. It's one of those suburban train stations that has so much parking demand that people spill over onto the street. I mean, it's actually a very dangerous situation. So the working group there, that model really did work, and they're actually planning to go to town meeting this year with 2 40R districts. So it was a way of getting almost like a conversation with a smaller group of people who understood what the concerns were of the town and understood the concerns of the neighborhood. And to be able to say, to also work with a couple of landowners who had key parcels, and come up with a vision plan that did respond to what came out of the public meetings, but also expressed the reality of what the developers needed as well. And the town had a planning grant to work on complete streets on the street that leads to the train station. So there were a lot of pieces kind of all coming together. And, is the zoning going to pass? I don't know. But the working group took ownership of the project, and I think that was key. So it wasn't Joe Consultant standing up saying anymore, well, here's what you could do, which I love to do, right? But it's far more effective if the community at some point has somebody who takes ownership of this and is able to stand up and say, here's why we think this is the right thing to do. Working with that group made all the difference in the world. And so we wanted to just mention this to you because, it may be more effective for you in the long run to have a working group that's functional, that has enough people representing of enough different points of view that things can kind of get vetted at that level, and they can begin to have a conversation about trade-offs, without the pressure of a public meeting. I don't know quite how to say it. And so you can do some sort of mini visualizations with them, like literally in the meeting, or come back right away with, sketches and have them respond. Have them begin to think about how they're going to reach out to their residents, their neighbors, what they could do in terms of public participation without the consultants involved, and what they're willing to lead. And it took a lot of pressure off the planning board.
So one of the things when you sent an email about that, and one of my questions to you was, there's, in my experience with Master Plan Implementation Committee, when we were working as a group with a consultant on Milton Village overlay zoning, was making sure that everybody who wanted to participate could participate
Right.
and could hear. So one of the things we did was we said, okay, we want small meetings so that we can sit around a table and it's easier than this kind of format. And we did 3 weeks in a row, and we had a sign up, and our assistant town planner sort of managed it so we wouldn't have only 10 people at each one. And we were able to accommodate everyone in that way.
You mean you had a lot of participation, so there were more meetings, but?
No, we had just an understanding of, you and I know the lingo
Yeah.
and the tools, but not the average person in the public doesn't
Right.
know the tools even, right?
Right.
So when you're talking about sort of bringing the education, you can have education when you have 50 people in a room and you're standing and you have a PowerPoint, or you can also have education in smaller groups.
I understand exactly what you're saying. Right.
So, but is it only this steering committee that can have that benefit, or is there a benefit to more people, is my question to you?
I think there is a benefit to more people, but I think the benefit to that larger group of people can be more effective if a smaller group first feels like they're in a position to start to lead in some direction. And so we were just thinking, and it was just based on our experience, it was both in Littleton and actually a project in Dedham, of when you have a smaller group who kind of, when you go around the room, you can see all the arguments, and to be able to have a conversation about trade-offs at that level, to begin to kind of weed away the stuff that perhaps really they're not arguing about so much, and so you can focus the argument, that it just makes it a little easier to go back then to a larger meeting and share all that learning and share kind of how we got to this point. But it's a group of residents who are able to do that, and not just the consultants or staff or whoever.
How many, ideally, is it the group of 5 that we have now, or is it a bigger group
Well, we
than
kind of
that?
thought you probably would need some more. I mean, we're supposed to meet with them on the 21st, right? Isn't that the
Yes.
plan? So I don't even know these folks, so it's hard for me
Which
to
is one.
comment, It's hard for me to comment, like, is this the right group? Is this enough people? I have no clue. I'll probably have a better opinion about that after the 21st, but,
So after the 21st, I know you said it's beyond the scope to do this kind of work. Do you think after the 21st, when you meet with the group, that you might have a better idea of how much more work, so that we would have some opportunity to think about whether
Yeah.
that's a strategy to
Absolutely.
follow?
Absolutely. I mean, we did talk about what we thought it would take, just based on other projects we have worked on, and we thought that four meetings with the working group could get us to a point where at least enough issues might be settled, that we could go back to a larger community meeting with, with some things that other people besides the consultants may be able to say, this is why we think it should be, this way or that way or something else. Four meetings, I think in Littleton, we might have done 5.
And did you, you talked about some additional visualizations, and you had emailed a potential budget figure. Is that
Yeah.
the number you're still at after
I
Bill
mean,
and I coped?
years ago, I have to tell you, it's probably on TV, I shouldn't say this. Mark Bobrowski said to me years ago that I have a public sector mentality, and I think I kind of do, and I'm always afraid to come and ask clients for money.
I know.
But if you ask, I'm terrible at it. I am. But I mean, it's like, at some point, it's like,
I think of it as an investment, so
I know.
think of it that way.
It's just really hard. We were trying to think about, 4 meetings, prep time for 4 meetings, some interim visualizations to bring back to the working group. What does that entail? That's not a skill set I have. I also frankly was hoping to do a bit more of a market assessment that I think we can do within the scope we have now, because I think it's fair to people to say, this is what it costs, to build in this region. This is what the land market is in your town. This is what land values are looking like. If I'm going to build something in your community, it's going to cost me X. Here's what I can get for rents. Here's what it's going to cost me to finance this thing. How I end up with this piece of bulk or some other piece of bulk is because I can't make the deal work.
Understood.
So we wanted
Understood.
to be able to get better numbers on that. I can speak to that at kind of this level now. I think it would be more helpful to you if we could speak to it at this level, meaning closer to the ground. But that's my view on this. So I was trying to fold those things in and say, what do I think we could do this at?
So are you still at that approximately $24,000 figure?
I'm thinking that's what it is, but nobody has gotten, I haven't heard anything back yet. I was waiting for somebody to
Well-
push back and say, are you crazy? And-
Well, I did have a conversation with Bill and Allison, and we thought we should have a conversation as a board here.
Of course.
But I did ask Bill to look into what we have remaining in our budget, because we do have funds remaining in both the planning board and the master plan implementation committee budgets for the current fiscal year, which
Yep.
goes through the end of June. So Bill, were you able to get that, or close to that?
Close.
Close is good.
I almost feel like guilty even doing this,
No,
but it's
no,
like, we
no.
just think it's a better model. That's why we brought it up.
Well, honestly, I made this comment previously too. I think we need to understand what's feasible.
Yeah, I mean, there's
They
no
don't-
point in doing a visualization of something that is
Exactly.
never going to happen.
Right.
And couldn't possibly happen.
And
It needs to be related to reality.
Right, I think the reality part is what people have been asking us for.
That's what I thought I heard, and that's
Yeah.
why I'm feeling this way, like, we need to
So we have a
change
total,
direction a
Yeah.
little
We
bit.
wanted to put this in. This isn't put in, but that's what we want to put in. That's the next step.
so we potentially have about, if we hold that aside, we potentially have about 22, you're saying? 20 to 22. I'm sure you could manage
Close, I'll
something
make
with
the-
20.
I mean, I'll just tell Peter he can't come to a meeting and we'll take care of it. I mean,
All right,
you
so
know.
that, what he said we're holding is 15,000 for potential 40R overlay technical assistance with MAPC. So I think if we all agree we'd want to continue to hold that aside, we would have 20,000 approximately left we could use, and we would have no other funds in either account for any other work.
But if you went ahead with a 40R, wouldn't we be able to apply for a grant
We
from the
can,
state for
yeah.
that?
Yeah, I don't know where any of that stands right now. I
Yeah.
mean, I know the EOEA round is done, whether he does another one this year, I don't know.
Yeah.
Mass Housing is not funding any more of those planning studies right now, that I know of.
Yeah.
I'm on their consultants list and I haven't heard any more, so.
And the other
Always
thing,
catch as catch can with these
Yeah.
grant programs.
I know, but
You
it's
know what
sort of
it's like.
frustrating.
It is.
It's like we're being told in the local level that the administration wants to create more housing,
Right,
but there's no
exactly.
tools to help you
Table,
get
remember
there.
the
Out there.
How many of
Right.
you remember the community action statement? Does anybody around?
Yeah.
You do, right? You would.
But the other thing is, we know it's a tight fiscal year next year.
Right.
And we know that if we have things that we think we really want to advance, and we have them in the budget this year already, that we should take advantage of what we have allocated this year, I think.
You're not going to get it next year.
I doubt we'll get it next year, yeah. So,
I do think East Milton is a priority right now.
Yes.
all right, so with that, do we have any concerns about going forward in this manner? Do we have support for going forward in this manner?
Wholehearted support from me.
Yeah, you guys can, I missed the first part, so I'm a little confused on what the deliverable
I'm
is.
sorry, yes.
The deliverable, the second meeting would be kind of a synopsis and overview of their perceptions of what they heard in the first meeting, plus sort of reality check on certain things, sort of what's happening in the marketplace and other places, what might make sense for financially to get the kind of, development that would move forward, So, and then from that go into these working group sessions to dig into more detail. But part of it is educational, really, the second meeting, meaning bringing some expertise to the discussion about, what's working and not working in other places. And also how to start to address some of the concerns they've already heard. Did I summarize that?
You're not
very
talk-
well.
We're not talking about one property, we're talking about the area, right?
Whole
The
district.
area.
Okay, good.
Yes, the area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I still think that whole idea about whether we incorporate beyond the district where there's businesses already that are
Right.
pre-existing non-conforming, that kind of stuff is
It's part
detailed,
of
but
this
it's
anyway,
all part of
right.
it, yeah.
Yes, absolutely, it's all part of it. And we think that's something that does need to be
Yeah.
discussed, so.
No, I think makes sense to me. I will
Yeah,
say.
that would be rather than going directly from the second meeting to a third meeting and not do these working groups, small,
words, we'd go
your
to
steering
a
committee group work. So there would still be a meeting at the end.
Oh, yeah.
But in between the second and the third meeting, there would be 4 working group meetings.
Yeah, because that does not include the one on Monday. The one on Monday, or Tuesday, whatever it is, we're just doing that. So the
Okay.
4 I'm talking about are after
After
that.
that, right.
No,
okay.
I like it. I mean, and this
Okay.
isn't, I'm not hearing this from lots of people, but I definitely heard walking around the room in the last one, I think there was some folks that were a little disconnected because this has been going on for a long time.
Yeah,
We talked about
we
that,
heard
yeah.
that, we did. And that's why I'm saying, I
Yeah.
think, it's part of why we're thinking this next meeting, we owe it to people to say, we really did hear what you said, and so here's what's happening in the region with these kind of redevelopment projects, reinvestment projects, infill, what do they look like, what's the scale? Here are things we thought came out of the visual preference survey, these were the kinds of things people liked. Here are a few examples of where that kind of project has happened, and what has been the associated, if any, traffic mitigation or parking
Okay.
management or something. And I'm, I think we need to bring a parking management type of example into this based on what I've heard here. But it was to be able to come back and give people some ideas of what actually might be possible. And then why, when they hear about a scale of project that's alarming to them, that it may be that it's too big. It may be that there's an economic necessity to some of this, and this is what the reality of development is in the Boston area right now. And they may not like it, but at least we've given them an answer, I think, which is fair.
One more thing that she mentioned earlier, Rich, that I think you would care about is that she's going to look at other case studies where there's a heavy traffic issue,
Yeah.
so that she can kind of address those and how people manage that in other places. Which I
Okay.
think seems important.
How far will that go? Like, so, not to open up, can of worms, but there's been a lot of changes with traffic patterns and closing and things, and I know that there's a whole lot of people around the town that are irritated about that, but I've never heard anybody say, well, no, it's the right thing to do to open, or it's the wrong thing to do. It's more or less, it is what it is. And so I mean, and I know that other people are looking at traffic, but like, how far will that go? Like,
We're not
That's
going
way
to
beyond
take,
her scope of.
That's
that's what-
invaders.
well, that's why I asked. So
Yeah,
how-
we
how
shouldn't be
far
adding
will-
that to her scope.
we're
I
not
wasn't. I
going
was just
to
asking the
take,
question.
we're not going to take and look at the deck area at all. It's already gone out to bid.
Yeah.
Some people have already taken, they're asking questions. I don't know that they bid on it.
So,
They
no, that's
turned the
fine.
bids in
You
yet.
don't have to go that far. What I would say then is, honestly, then that would be irrelevant for me, because
Yes.
I don't think that'll add any value. Because unless you look at the entire thing, it doesn't do much.
So here's the thing, we have Beta with a traffic consultancy, doing a model, basically, to take the data that, there's a lot of studies
Oh,
that's
no,
already been done.
I agree with that.
And
Yeah, that makes sense.
And what's going to happen with that is they can plug in, if you add 40 units, if you add 50 units, if you add 40,000 square feet of
Yeah.
medical office space, what does that do to your traffic flow? And it'll simulate it
Yeah,
for you.
and just to be clear,
So-
the reason why I went through all that was because I agree with that.
Yeah.
But in order to like understand, I'm not a traffic engineer, but I know enough to say, in order to understand traffic, you got to understand what's inputting to the area, and you got to understand all the different sides. And so that's why I was asking what the scope was, because if we're just going to look at a little piece of it, you're not going to get anything from it.
So Rich, I think that what we did in Milton Village is a good example, because we had MAPC do a build-out analysis based on the overlay zoning, and then Beta did an existing conditions traffic analysis and parking analysis. Then they did another analysis based on the build-out analysis. And so they used the MAPC build-out analysis. They didn't have the traffic model, so they used the data that they had. We had them do some more counts, and so there's a lot of data that's already there. And so they could, and I envision that the same thing, would eventually happen here. They do the analysis, they do this work, and then we'd end up having to have some kind of build-out analysis done. So in Milton Village, as you may remember, because of the funding, it went in multiple steps and
Yeah.
multiple requests for funding. But that was really, I thought the traffic engineer, he made an excellent presentation and to explain his study and his recommendations. And something that was fascinating to me was that the mixed use actually is a lesser traffic
That's correct.
impact
Yep.
than a full commercial use in
Yeah,
a
it
business
is.
district.
Yeah.
And in part,
Oh,
if you
yeah.
think about it, because if you have like a medical office, that's on the highest end
That's right.
of the traffic generators, because you have appointments like every half hour or hour. And
Right.
so you have churn of those cars, every hour. So like
Yeah.
if you had like a building, if you compared a building, one building, same square footage, that was all, let's say, medical office, and the same building, same square footage was all residential, the traffic impact of that office building is a lot
Much
more.
greater.
And they have their counts for
greater.
how they come up with
Yeah.
it, but
Yeah.
even different than just standard office space or retail space.
It's one of the
Depending upon the kind of
the great
retail.
public education things we deal with all the time in housing and mixed-use development is the housing is not going to create more of a traffic problem than you already have.
So I think, in my, again, not speaking for any of my other neighbors, but for myself,
Yeah.
that's not what I'm worried about.
Yeah.
It's already chaos
Yeah, it sure
because of a
is.
lot of
Yeah.
issues. It's because the state's been making changes to that intersection over to Esquantum Street that's caused a ton of traffic. There's lights that don't exist that we need lights. There's issues with signaling that we know that's going to be fixed. There's issues with just getting people around East Milton quickly. And so, honestly, I think, from, again, my opinion, if you hear complaints about traffic for what's about to come in, it's because it's awful right now.
Yeah.
And it could be fixed. I mean, a real good study there and some actual changing and fixing could be fixed. And then it's not, when that's fixed, I think people would be more open to the idea of, okay, you're going to bring something else. You've made some effort, you fixed the neighborhood, that's fantastic, let's move forward and get some more, let's
I
get
think
things
that's
in
why
here.
town meeting was supportive of the funding for this townwide traffic
Right.
study, is that they see the value in doing it for existing condition, but also helps analyze what you're going to be able to do, anything going forward.
You're just going to have a hard time selling that's not going to bring anything to the neighborhood without this other conversation too. I mean, that's
Well,
it's
except you're not
hard,
going to be able to
cheap.
fix the parking before you have the development. Because
but
you're
you
going to
can have a plan.
have the developers kind of help to pay for it.
Right, but you could have a plan. You
Yeah.
could say to the town, this is our vision with pictures for the area, and this is why it's going to be so much better.
Yeah.
And then you can literally sit back and go, oh, okay, yeah, I understand it now. Right now, there's never been a plan.
So I think what we need is from an update, Bill, maybe from Beta, on what their schedule is for their work, so we can make sure it dovetails with the schedule of Judy's work.
That's what I was going to ask. Is there any way to maybe by that third meeting make some of that happen?
So, Bill,
happy
can
to
you check
coordinate
with
with
Jeff
them.
on that?
It's Jeff.
Yeah, I know. Right.
He told me the other
You know
day.
Jeff?
Yeah, I know. He's on a team with me on another project. so.
Okay.
And
All right,
Justin
so-
Justin, who did the village study
Justin was
for us.
fabulous.
It's Jeff Max Tatutis and Justin.
He's able to talk traffic in a language that people can understand, I felt
Was it
anyway.
on tape? Was the presentation on
No,
tape that Justin?
unfortunately, I
Okay.
really was disappointed. We asked and they couldn't accommodate that time. Yes, Bill?
The townwide traffic model there's 5 different components to it. There's traffic data collection, there's the traffic model, traffic analysis and simulations, which are the ones that you want. Those don't come until after the model is built. The model is built based on the data collection.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of meetings and memos, and yes, we have the truck loading and delivery built into there too.
So can they talk and see,
Absolutely.
Jeff and Judy talk and see if we can get something so that
Great.
they're on the same page at certain points?
It's not going to come in the month of January
But
and
it's,
February.
I don't think it
I
needs
don't
to, like, you can say, we've got an idea, we're working on it, this is the progress we're making, and this is what we hope to have, like, happen from it, before it happens, right? I mean, you could, it's not, I mean, just, this is what this is what we'd like to see happen. We'd like to see, cars cycle through faster, and we're working on this so that we can get to that, and it's gonna fix it. We're working with the state on this, or we're working with,
And
you know what I mean? There's a lot of components.
That's what the analysis and simulations are.
Yeah.
They know this building's going to generate this number. He plugs in that number. Well, what if I go up X amount of units, he can plug in more cars. Well, if I take out, he can take out. You can actually see them.
Yeah.
But Judy may come back and
I'll just say
say,
a
we
little
want you
PR
to slow
before they
down
went
traffic, and we want you to add crosswalks and bump outs so that it's more pedestrian and bike friendly. And then we go back to Jeff and say, run this now if we do this, right? So that's where I would like to see where I think
Sure.
the back and forth makes sense, right?
That's the model.
If you're riding a bike, watch the potholes. They're very deep.
Yes, and then you veer around them and you're in the traffic lane.
You know,
All right, mindful of our,
Someone almost hit one with a motorcycle. It's very scary.
all right, so mindful of, we have more on our agenda for
And Judy
tonight.
has time. And Judy has to
And
go,
Judy
too.
has time
think so.
constraints.
We're still on for the 29th,
We're
right?
planning to have the steering committee meet on the 21st. The whole of everybody meet at the Art Center on the 29th.
Are we still on for that date?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Those dates
Fit
have
our
been
other dates.
circulated,
Okay.
and
Thank you.
we're trying to get a wide distribution of
Okay.
people who've been notified on those.
And that will be in the East Milton neighborhood, January 29th?
This is
It's
at
in
the
the Art
Arts
Center.
Center.
Art
that
Center,
been-
thank you.
That's set.
Just adding it to my,
Yeah, it's on our, this list went out to a lot of
Yeah.
associations and media and town
Great.
websites.
List of people that
And
got it.
and Allison has a
That
great
was
list
great.
she's been
good
keeping.
job.
And we've been adding
That's
to it,
great.
so if there's anybody who hasn't received it, who's watching tonight and wants to be on the list, contact Allison.
go.
Okay, and so with that, what I'd like to get a vote on is to authorize Bill to work with Judy on a revised contract that would include the scope we've discussed tonight, and authorize an additional $20,000 of funds available from the planning board budget.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you,
so
Judy.
much.
Thanks, Judy, that was great.
Thank you very much.
Nice. Thank you.
All
Go
right.
to another meeting, I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for making it tonight.
Not a problem. Okay, enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Thank you.
This is the most recent version.
Okay, back to administrative items like I said
okay.
we would do. Our next meetings are January 23rd and February 13th. We will need to hold
Thank you very
public
much.
hearings on the 2 zoning articles that we voted at our last meeting to go to the select board. The select board accepted those last night at their meeting. So because we have to advertise 2 consecutive weeks, the first week that we can start the public hearing on our regularly scheduled meetings would be February 13th. Okay, so we would open it then, and we will see how many meetings it takes before it's closed. So I just want to make sure people are aware of that. And then just also wanted, we talked about East Milton meeting. There also will be a meeting next week on the 15th, which I think is Wednesday.
Yeah.
At 7 PM on the Council on Aging, and it's what we're calling the Town Center Planning session, envisioning session. And Metropolitan Area Planning Council, MPAC, or it's actually MAPC, right? Josh Fiola will be working with us again. He's the one who worked with us in Milton Village. And Bill Allison and I have a call with him tomorrow just to confirm how he intends to run that. But outreach has been done to all of the users, the Fire Station Building Committee, the Youth Task Force, the Neighborhood Association, the churches, et cetera. And the idea there is that as the fire station, the central station design advances, is to think through making sure that other users and other potential uses are considered in that planning. So that's, again, January 15th, 7 o'clock at the Council on Aging. Next, we'll move to minutes. We have, Julia, we have a lot of minutes that you sent back out. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I did read through them. Thank you. I thought they were great. Does anybody have any edits or any?
I haven't read the last one.
Okay. And there was
But I-
actually
but I-
one edit or two that I think I might like to make in that one anyway, so.
But I'm up to speed on the others. If you don't mind
Yep.
handing them to me, I'll read the dates in, if you have them handy. I didn't. Okay, thank you. So I move to approve as amended minutes from October 17th, 2019, 11/7/2019, 11/21, 2019, December 2nd, 2019, December 8th, 2019. Oh, that's a 5. December 2nd and 5th?
The town meeting in there.
Oh, right, okay. December 5th, 2019.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And thank you.
Great, yes, thank you.
Thank you for holding those for us.
All right, citizen speak. Is there anyone here who would like to address the board? I think we're going to do like we have before. If it's related to Milton Village or the Ice House, we're going to, we can take those at the time we discuss those. But if you don't want to wait for that, you're welcome to come up, or if you have another topic that you'd like to just bring to our attention, you're welcome to come up now. All right. Nobody's going to come up now.
Stampede.
Very, very quiet.
All right, so then we're going to go to number 5, old business, the discussion of 485 Blue Hills Parkway, or the Ice House 40B, our comment letter. And in fact, I got an email from the chair of the select board today asking if we could send our letter to them. I told him we would be discussing tonight and we would send it tomorrow, and he said that would be great. Okay? So everybody got the revised draft. And we also received some letters, and frankly, I haven't had a chance to review the letters that we received today from the Friends of the Blue Hills Parkway, Mr. Sloan, and, sorry, there's one other.
Lori Kessler.
Yes.
Friends of the Blue Hills, and Joseph Sloan's letter.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Association.
So just if we want to go through the draft itself. Bill, can you pull the draft up on the screen, the draft of our letter?
So I see this. Do I have that one in here?
It,
Which one is it? It should be in the
packet.
yellow.
It's in your package.
Yeah.
You went too far.
I went too far?
In fact, it's right before the.
Right before the,
There should be a cover sheet.
Yeah.
and then,
So the next thing I have is
yeah,
this
keep
one.
going, keep going.
Okay, and then I have Mike Zulis.
Okay, right after that.
Mike Zulis again.
Yeah.
You send
No, they
this
were addressed to
to
him.
them.
They were addressed to him. Oh, okay, so that, so, but it doesn't say draft on it, that's what threw
No,
me.
one
Yeah, it
before
does.
there, the one before that.
Ours does.
Right here. Mine is right
I
after.
think she got it.
I don't
yeah,
have
you
that
don't.
one.
Mine
I
is
have
right after
another,
that.
Yeah, I don't have
What's
that
the,
one.
There.
what do you have right there?
This is, oh, this is planning board.
Which one is it?
All right, we got that settled.
Do it.
All right. We don't have it up here yet, but, all right. So,
What time?
I saw the draft thing on it.
You saw the draft, and I was looking for it over here, going, it says Michael Zulus, not planning board, but.
all right,
okay.
so as they're
tired.
looking to pull that up,
I'm ready.
no problem. We pointed out that
We're at Christmas now.
there are problems with the application itself before we get into the substance. So the fact that there's references to both rental and home ownership, the fact that
here.
there's not demonstration of site control because the purchase and sale agreement is not signed by the seller. There's some other things that have been blacked out in the P&S. There's two different purchase price numbers. There's errors in the calculations of lot coverage and open space, errors in the calculation of the layout of parking spaces, errors in the description of what's existing on the site. Performa does not include certain information about monitoring fees and condo fees. And then we get into the next, which is more of the substance. First is the zoning. Okay, so we've got it up here. Again, pointing out errors in the description of the zoning, calling where it's called out as a residential business district, which the town does not have. The fact is it's a residence B, however, we also wanted to point out that there was a lot of effort made in getting an overlay adopted, which is the Parkway PUD. And with that, there were lots of neighbors who participated and expressed interest in small commercial amenity. So we're encouraging the developer to look at that PUD. And then in the design, so anything, actually, so let me stop there. Anything else? Anybody have any comment about the zoning components of it?
I just have a question.
Sure.
For you.
Okay.
The comment you just made about hopefully they're looking into it, is anyone in the town, is the selectmen or the planning department working with them to try to see if we can get something changed?
There was, yes,
Okay.
there was a meeting, and there's effort to schedule another follow-up meeting.
Okay, excellent.
And there's a willingness on the developer
Developer side.
side to do
Excellent.
that. Okay, so
Great.
that's all positive.
Okay, yeah,
And
great.
giving this feedback should be helpful to that discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, so anything else on the zoning? No, thank you, Kathleen, for drafting,
very
for
good.
revising the draft, for drafting the original and for the revisions. And then second is on design, and again, pointing out that the Parkway has historic significance in terms of the national landmark, leading from Boston to the Blue Hills. And the kind of character described as being an urban edge is totally inaccurate, as we all know.
Thought it was funny.
And that the architecture really, by presenting a long facade on the Parkway, isn't at all responsive to its context, which is one of the things that it's supposed to do or be in terms of the design. And then there's a few other things that we could get into with that they did not include, such as renderings and perspectives, things that would give people a better idea of how it doesn't fit in with the architecture. Because if one's left to look at the elevations without any dimensions on them, we can't even get a sense of the true scale. And then the third is on the smart growth. While this site is within reasonable walking distance of certain things, it doesn't meet some of the criteria that the applicant has said it does. So we're pointing those things out. Any comment about, actually, any further, sorry, on design or smart growth? Anyone?
I'm not sure if here's the right place, but there was
Okay.
something in the applicant about the parking lot as open space. And I think you covered it here in the,
Well, yeah, I mean, actually Lori Kessler has that or in her letter as well, and some other people. So I don't think that we don't have to treat this as the only comment. There are now 4 other letters that have gone in. Many of those letters echo the same sort of comments that we've been making. But I think Lori Kessler pointed it out in her letter to the selectmen that the calculation of open space was incorrect.
Okay. One of the things that I'm always concerned with is, how is the change in the topography and therefore the trees, and they're required to provide a proposed grading plan, which they did not do. So that's, I think, is pointed out here as well. We know pretty much that plan's going to require the removal of all trees on the property. And the fact that it's abuts conservation land is of concern. And the mature trees were something that really actually characterizes the parkway. So the removal of those trees and having a building very close to the sidewalk is about as the opposite side of being respectful to the context. So in more than design, but in the conservation as well. So those, I think I summarized. Anybody have
Anything I missed?
anything that you think we should add? And then maybe before we do that, is there anybody here who would like to address the board on this topic? Yes.
I'm Katie Schmidt. I live at 62 Blue Hill Park, no, 62 Churchill Street. And I want to pay attention to page 30, where
The
it's talking
application?
about protect land and ecosystems.
Okay, can you just give us 1 second, Bill? Do you have the application?
Yep.
Thank you. Do you have it?
I didn't print it off because it's.
I have it.
It's long. It's fine. We'll just, if you don't mind, just give us a minute
Sure.
to get it up on the screen.
That's part of the sustainable development section.
Okay, go ahead and we'll see if we can follow you while he's
And
pulling
it's
that up.
part 3, protect land and ecosystems. And they needed to check, or X, a couple boxes here. And the 2 boxes that they chose, protection of sensitive land, including prime agricultural land, critical habitats and wetlands, well, is next to the conservation land. But what I think is more disturbing is they've checked eliminates or reduces neighborhood blight.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have a big what? With 2 exclamation marks next to it. And I think that,
Would you like for us to add something to our letter to that
We should
effect?
definitely do that.
Okay, so
Yes,
let's see where that would make, that would be in our last section then, because it's under the conservation portion. Okay, so does anyone want to make a proposed language addition to this? The
And I
drafter
think
of our
that they-
letter, would she like to come up with something for us to consider?
I think why they checked that is they couldn't check any other boxes, and they needed to check a box.
Yeah.
They needed to check 2.
They drove by my house, that's the problem.
Thank you. Kathleen will work on something here. I see
Yeah,
you're
I'll put a new
working.
paragraph in about that.
But
Yeah,
we're
because
gonna-
they haven't talked about anything in terms of connecting the site to the conservation land next to it.
No.
You know, nothing.
If you look at the box they check, the protection of sensitive land, including prime agricultural land, critical habitats and
Yeah,
wetlands.
right.
They do not, they say nothing about wetlands, they say nothing about critical habitats. What are they protecting?
Yeah.
They didn't make, they didn't put anything in about
Well,
the parking on the
right, I
side.
mean, the letter says, it is absolutely inaccurate for the applicant to state that the project is protecting sensitive land, critical habitats, and wetlands when the application proposes to remove anything on site and locate the parking, pavement, and lighting directly abutting the town's conservation land. So maybe what we just add a sentence here that's completely inaccurate to say that
there is
it is,
no
there is no blight.
Yeah.
We can actually, if we're doing that, we can add in the comment about the open space too.
So,
The open space calculation was incorrect.
I think in the very beginning, where
I think we may have,
when we talked about Blue Hill Parkway itself, you have conservation land to the right, you've got conservation land in the rear. Across the other side of the parkway, you have conservation land that goes from the brook all the way down to the beginning of Home Inc. And there's a bunch of conservation restrictions on that same land. So that.
So we should just add a whole new paragraph.
but look at the first page in number 5.
Yeah.
You have here where it says that there's an error, I'm sorry, there's an error, there are errors in the calculation of lot coverage and the percentage of open space. But so do you want to elaborate on that in the back?
Well, yeah, I think we should, I think it's not just the error in calculation on the open space. I mean, it's generally ignoring
Right.
the fact that it abuts conservation land and a national parkway. And so, you know, it's just sort of like, I'm building this, and I'm not paying any attention to what I've got around me.
But I'm asking for credit for protecting
But I'm asking for
sensitive
credit.
land.
Yeah, and I haven't provided any information
Right.
on how I'm tying this parking lot over, I mean, you know, over into the Pope's, you know, over into the
Conservation land.
Conservation land. I mean, essentially, I'm clear cutting the whole thing and putting parking.
Paving it.
And paving it, and putting lights that will shine into the, and I haven't said anything about how I'm doing anything about protecting the conservation area.
All right, so the question is, can we get something done tonight and vote this to send it, or so that our comments can then now be public, because this letter has only been internal? And I'm a little concerned about waiting until our next meeting, which is the 23rd,
No, why don't we
and then
just
we
sort
only
of
have...
vote to say that we'll do this letter with the addition of a paragraph that addresses the protection, the failure to protect
Okay.
areas, and just add another paragraph, and that letter will be, with that amendment, would be approved.
I think it's, would be helpful to go to the next page, because on page 31, they're supposed to make an explanation it's required.
The LAD stuff is not,
No.
Oh, it's not there?
Again,
not
well,
there.
they haven't, they're not, they
Yeah.
have not provided any information
Yeah.
about low-impact design.
Yeah.
So that could be added too.
I had another.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think those two
Thanks,
things are
Dana.
really good. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Somebody did submit a letter about, and mentioning vernal pools. And I guess they just checked off that there are no vernal pools or something.
there's no wetlands on this site.
On the site, but nearby.
On this site. It's 100, no, it's 97, get it right. It's 92.9 feet to the bank of Pope's Pond. It's 200 feet, that's to the property line.
Okay.
It's 200 feet from the property line, from the top of the bank at Pine Tree Brook to the property. So they don't have to file with Concom. The only thing that could bring it in is if there is a wetland line that comes in on the conservation land to the side. But we don't know that. They didn't show any wetlands on the abutting properties.
But a vernal pool doesn't necessarily have to be in a wetland.
Yeah,
Have to be certified.
you would show up in a report.
It would be in proximity to it, and it would be 100 feet away. There are none located at this, nobody's ever located any there, so.
I'm just wondering, is there a MIPA review or anything on the abutting property?
I don't think so. They wouldn't
Because
trigger
I
any
know when we
MIPA.
did Milton Muse, when we were dealing with Milton Muse, they did go into the Foul Meadow property because it was abutting DCR, and they did have to go in that area.
Yeah,
all
but
the way
that
around.
was that was like, what, 300 something units?
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was 276.
So it triggered a
Triggered a
MIPA
MIPA
review. I
review.
don't think this
Couple of
one
different
will.
things. Yeah, this
Yeah.
won't be enough.
The only
land
thing
area,
was
though.
there were vernal pools,
Well,
and
that's
they
what I'm
happened
thinking.
to
They
be.
probably are here too. They
But
just-
that site had wetlands on it. That's what triggered this whole
True,
thing.
that's true.
I don't
yeah.
This
think
has none.
This does. I mean, a lot of it's been you know, covered over with buildings and.
This has no
commercial
wetlands
activity
at
and
all
stuff
on
like
site.
that.
Because I just know, like, if there are salamanders, then you have to protect, like, a football size, like, surrounding
Box
area.
turtles.
Yeah,
And
you do,
100 feet.
because the salamanders live in the upland, so this doesn't seem very upland. But they have to be able to get to the vernal pool where they were born, so they can lay their eggs, and then they need to be able to get back. So you cannot put pavement in between. So, but I don't know that but I didn't, is this something to be assessed or not? I don't know.
Well, I think that's sort of a narrow, I mean, that's a sort of low, you know, area kind
Yeah.
of thing. I think what we basically want to say is that, you know, this whole thing is.
Oh, no, these things are
and then-
really important.
and
This
when-
is kind
when
of
it
in the
gets-
weeds.
when
Yeah, if it gets past this
Gets
phase,
past this stage,
then we can try to find new permitting hurdles. I
then
guess.
there will be issues before the ZBA.
You can be out there with your flashlight looking
go
for
out there and look for
salamanders.
Well, rent, right,
Look for some salamanders in the spring,
Rent
April.
box turtles or
around
something.
April.
I've
Check for 2
actually
hours
heard
of
of
rain, 2 in the morning.
Developers accusing people of putting them there.
Okay, so,
That's just happening all the time.
One of the things says it's going to improve drainage. Doesn't show any drainage in any of these plans.
well, that's part of just the whole inaccuracies.
You don't
I
have, well, the
find.
silence, it's not even inaccurate, it's just that you don't,
Silence.
there's a lot of things you just don't provide.
Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board on this topic? Joe?
Just a quick.
Hi, Joe.
Joe, thank you for your
Haven't seen
email.
you in a while.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I have to do a 23B3 disclosure. Joe and I are on the same committee, Neighborhood Coalition.
Thank you. I think your letter is great. Excuse me, I saw the draft, and I think it's great. And I think, as Kathleen pointed out, it's really interesting to see what some of the other letters that have been already submitted to the select board say, and I think they complement each other really well. I'm just really impressed with some of the things that people have picked
yeah,
up on.
yeah.
We learned last night, just a little, to divert a little bit from the letter, we learned last night at the select board public meeting that they had on this topic, that yesterday morning, the developers submitted to the town a list of corrections. It was kind of qualified as correcting typographical errors and maybe some other bits of information. It was not quite clear what that was. And also, wasn't quite clear because the select board had not seen it, so it wasn't really available for anybody last night. But I think it's fair to say that the select board was a little puzzled by it, and puzzled by my picking up on that comment. The developer's agent said that they had submitted this based on some feedback that they had received, that there were maybe some inaccuracies or typos or whatever. Bill, I spoke to Bill this afternoon, and he'll be able to explain it a little bit better than I can. But I just think that it's important that this board know that. I asked the question last night if those corrections had been submitted to the state before they were submitted to the town, and the answer was no. I'm not sure how appropriate that is. This board's done a great job as have the other people who have responded to the select board, to respond to the application that we all got. So I'm not sure what the town is going to do with this, having received this. I hope that people are going to stay focused on, in the time remaining, on the application. And as Chairman Zula said last night, it may muddy the works a little bit. It may, he acknowledged that it might prompt a request for a little bit more time in the comment period. I think that the select board will kind of look and see how it affects any of the comments that have either come in already or are yet to come in, because people shouldn't really be commenting on anything other than what the application is. So, again, it's really an FYI so that you would know going forward kind of where that is.
Yes, Rich?
I was just going to say, I read your letter too. I thought it was great. You put a lot into it. No, my just question, did you send it just to the select board, or are you sending yours to the state too?
I will send it to the state,
Cool.
absolutely. Yeah, and I think that was encouraged by the
Right.
select board.
Yeah, I was gonna say it would be
To do
nice,
that. Yeah, I mean, not because anybody thought it wouldn't be included in the town's package, but.
It's nice to get
that
more
just-
letters.
Just,
Right.
it was
Yeah, no, I mean,
encouraged.
I think it's an excellent
Yeah.
idea. And I also think that, telling the town at a meeting that, oh, well, we fixed the mistakes that we heard about because they got somebody's letter, I guess.
Well, they're watching us all on
Would
TV because
seem to
we're not hiding
me,
it.
yeah, it would seem to me that you would have to submit a new application to Mass Housing.
That's what I would think.
And then I would be saying to our town administrator, you should be calling Mass Housing and saying, we understand that there's a corrected application, and that the review period is going to run from the receipt of the corrected application. You can't be changing pages and say, oh, we'll review this, well, we took care of, X, Y, and Z. I mean, I think that we still would send in our letters because the project, whatever corrections they're making, is probably not changing the building or addressing clear cutting or, all the sort of major questions about the project. I think they've just fixed the typos.
Right.
But,
Like condos. and-
Well,
Yeah.
we haven't
Yeah.
seen them, so,
No,
I mean, I didn't get
right.
any
Yeah.
physics,
Nice
so.
Thank you, Joe.
distraction technique
Thank
to
you,
me.
Joe.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Joe.
thanks, Joe.
Is there anyone else?
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
Joe Madunio from Blue Hills Parkway. So, given that this...
Also a nice letter.
Thank you,
Very
Leland.
nice letter, thank you,
Well, it
Joe.
wasn't just me, that was a combo letter. But given that the community seems to be kind of unanimously upset about the design of this building, and maybe the density of it, the amount of units, given that it's a 40B, what can we do? How much influence do we have over asking them to change that design or limit the number?
Well, as-
Along with all the ecological issues, which I'm really concerned about, but...
Well, in terms of that, just to answer that first question, the state does encourage the developer, the applicant, to work with the town, and the town has reached out to the developer, and there has been a meeting, and there will be a follow-up meeting, and I was asked to I was asked by the Chair Zulus, to participate in that meeting. It was a productive meeting. I think everybody at the meeting felt it was productive, including the applicant, and there was a discussion about the concerns that had been expressed thus far, and there seemed a willingness to work with us on those concerns. How far? I don't know yet, but at least the dialogue has begun, and there's an open communication. So that's a very
there's hope.
positive.
Yeah, that's hope. So
I
this
think,
isn't designated as a friendly 40B? That's a separate thing, or is that just a kind of...
It is not.
It's
a
not,
friendly.
right, officially, right,
No,
it's
I mean,
not.
that goes through a different
Okay,
process.
that's what I wasn't sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
not this one.
And, one thing I just wanted to point out, I was talking with a few people today, Tom Palmer in particular, and I sent along a photo that he had sent to me about some encroachment issues. I don't think that's part of the building design anyway, as it is right now, but the family McKeans had filled in land. I think you understand all that, right? That there's probably buried wetlands under there, maybe salamanders too, who knows, right? So I don't know, people should be aware of that, I guess, right? And it is hinted at in the application someplace, so.
Could that get it into the Conservation Commission?
It has.
It's in the Conservation Commission?
They understand that it's there.
Oh, good, okay.
One of their comments was that they would like to actually see a pathway go around the pond, that there be some type of connection between this development and the pond, and maybe use the area that is already paved as a parking area for the public to access that piece of the pond.
That's news to me. That's,
So, I mean, they're just starting their comments
That's
to...
the Conservation Commission's comments. So there'll be a,
Yeah, but I think we had also put it in here that if, there was some, discussion about, lots of times what will happen is that Mass Housing will take all these letters and they'll issue a site eligibility letter, and it will have conditions in it.
I
And
see.
say that when the project gets submitted to the zoning board with comprehensive permit, that these conditions, you have to take care of X, Y, and Z, and they'll pick up on some of the things that would have been in these letters. We hope.
We hope,
And that's
yeah.
some of the things that would happen under some circumstances. They'll say, oh, we've gotten feedback from the town, and we want to make sure that when you submit this application, you've included X, Y, and Z. And I think that would be a perfect condition for them to say, developer, you're going to have to do improvements, connections to trails and, handicapped access to the conservation land from your site. And they could do that as part of their conditions.
Well, that's good to hear.
And the zoning board can do it too, because that's not the end of the story.
Okay.
Is that when the application gets filed with the zoning board, if that goes forward, the zoning board is the one that takes in all the comments from all the other boards and commissions and can put in conditions in there that address Conservation Commission. If they don't have, Conservation Commission doesn't have its own jurisdiction because there's no wetlands, they can still send a letter to say, we'd like to see these things incorporated as conditions into the comprehensive permit.
That's good to know. It sounds like you really know what you're talking about, which is nice to hear. I don't
Make
think...
up a lot of stuff.
You make it up as you go along. Unfortunately, I don't think there are certified vernal pools on the boundary of that property. But I know from my own experience, there are pools of water there
Right,
for all summer long, which I would call vernal pools. And I don't know about spotted salamanders in particular, which I have an affection for, but I know there's lots of other amphibians that breed there because I go down there all the time and I've taken photos and recorded them for my classes.
Eggs in the spring and summer?
Yes,
in the summer?
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So,
Well, there are
Might need
ways to
those
get
photos.
those.
pardon me?
I said those photos might come in handy.
They could come in handy, yeah. So, I mean, those are things to be aware of, I guess, but, yeah.
You want to be in touch with the Conservation Commission about your sightings and bring some photos.
Okay, all right,
Let them
I'll
know,
gladly
yeah.
do that, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks, Joe.
Could just, is it safe to say that that would be kind of the next step, barring them saying you need to resubmit and fix all these errors?
What, that they would be filing the application?
They would.
Oh,
yeah.
that they'd issue a site eligibility
Right.
letter, yes.
That's the
That
next
would
step.
be the next step. And it would have, hopefully, some conditions that,
Or
the
putting-
town would have
right.
suggested. Maybe setback further from, the town could, the Mass Housing could say, I'm sorry, but this is a historic parkway and you can't be building this building right on it.
Right.
They've done a site walk.
Has DCR weighed in, do you know?
Yeah, we went to the site, was at the sidewalk.
Yeah, I don't know.
Did DCR weigh in on this at all?
They did not. They chose not to make any comment. They sent a letter today saying no comment at this time.
That's very helpful, isn't it?
Oh, very.
Comment at this time.
Kathleen, how often are site eligibility letters or site eligibility applications rejected? Outright?
I'd have to say
Never?
that I've never seen one get rejected. I've seen them where, we have one here that on Randolph Ave, which was a joke in comparison to what the site actually looked like. So I don't know.
Is it because they're just saying go forward and work with the town to?
Well, I mean,
Get to
I
the
think
next
that
step.
it was interesting to me as somebody that got involved, as you did, with a smart growth in the beginning when that first got adopted. I worked on the legislation, I worked on the regulations. And so when somebody checks off a box and says it's smart growth, you're like, what are you thinking? I mean, this is...
You might want to revisit the definition.
Yeah, and I think they're smart because I thought of it, apparently. But not
Because I like those words, sound good.
it
They have a
actually
nice
meets
ring to
sustainable
them.
principles or, any of that sort of thing. I don't know.
ring that
It's-
word.
It's hard to say.
It's kind of like Urban Edge. They just like, it had a nice ring to it, so they just.
I know,
Check
Milton's
out.
Urban Edge, yeah.
Page 10 that's on the board right now is one of those pages that got changed.
Yeah, because there's a bunch of
In-
errors there.
Well, if you read where it says, yes, there'll be a limited number of parking spaces located under the main structure, which would be included in the purchase of the market units. It actually said, yes, there will be a limited number of parking spaces located under the main structure, which will be included in the monthly rent for the market units. The affordable units will also be able to have access to the space for an additional charge. Then it goes down and talks about the numbers. Well, the original set of numbers said 89 parking spaces. There are 94. It's just on
Yeah.
this page that they made these kind of mistakes. If you go back into the rest of the document
Didn't
that came back in November, the numbers are correct. It's just whoever did the proofing didn't,
Yeah, there's not 52% lot
it's in the
coverage.
back, but it's not in the front. Like,
It's 100%
You said
lot
something was
coverage.
changed?
Yeah.
What was
Well,
changed?
they came in and said that
18 here,
under
so-
lot coverage, in their original application, they said the buildings would cover 7% of the land. Well, we know that it's 27%.
Let me see,
Then it says
Jenny.
paving and
1 second.
parking in paved areas was 8%. Well, we know that it's 25%. The usable open space used to be 78% in their original application. Now it's down to 34.
Sorry, there's some confusion here. Kathleen, I
I know.
printed out something today where number
This is
5,
the wrong one.
the one that's in the packet is the older version? All right. Denny, you're welcome to look at my copy.
I'm
Yeah.
just looking at the open space one.
Okay. Just given the hour, and we know that we've pointed out a few more things that Kathleen said that she would pick up, is there anything else that we think of that we want to ask her to pick up in our letter?
No, I think it's really strong.
Okay. And Denny, do you want to take a minute further to look at that before we decide to vote on the letter? I mean, obviously, if there's new information that comes forward, that would be a whole separate discussion again, so.
Well, I mean, as I said, I think I'd be asking town administrator to call up Mass Housing and say, did you get anything?
And otherwise, everybody's proceeding with the application, as
Yeah.
Mr. Sloan pointed out.
Yeah.
Okay,
I didn't know if somewhere in the design, I just think the hugeness of it, right, so that would,
I wanted to be careful about that because of my history with the zoning board and the Randolph Ave
okay.
project.
So
I
I defer
stepped
to
away
you
from
because
that.
of, I understand that was.
Because I was kind of famous for saying something about that project,
Okay.
and I didn't want to repeat that same mistake.
I don't want you to make a mistake.
okay, so,
I don't know what that means, but whatever.
Yeah, sounds
Whatever
good.
you think.
Once you said that, I remembered reading that.
Yeah.
okay, so are we ready to take a vote on the letter, so it'll be revised and then forwarded to the select board? I know that they meet again on the 22nd, so it's before our next meeting.
Yeah.
But if it's in their hands, then at least they can consider it as they are working on their letter.
Yeah.
Right? Okay? Or their response. All right, then, I'll take a motion.
So,
Can I second my own letter? Yeah, I guess so.
Or unless one,
Second.
this side of the table wants to
you
second. Okay.
Second.
I'm in favor.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone, for your work on this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you, Joe and Joe.
Okay, so we're going to now move to the Milton Village overlay discussion. You Joshua? Joshua, okay. I just wanted to say that we voted our language to send to the select board. The select board accepted it last night. They haven't made any decisions about, what they're doing with each article in terms of support. So we'll have opportunity to present to them, so that many of them saw the presentation that the MPIC gave. I gave on behalf of MPIC in the fall, so they're very familiar with it already. They did express last night a willingness to reopen the warrant to take in a potential revised article. And one of the reasons, Rich and I having both served on the warrant committee, once it goes to the warrant committee, any change becomes a change in the recommendation of the warrant committee. And so it just seems a little, with a complicated zoning article, it just seems if we can get the language as close to what we think we want before the warrant committee gets it, it's just less confusing for people to follow. So with that, last time we talked about possibility of making a few changes based on some comments that we had received pretty close to the time of our meeting. But in the meantime, also, I had a conversation with someone who just in December purchased 1 Elliott, which I believe is the Webb Mill building. And
What building?
the,
The one on the corner of Adams and
Elliott.
And Elliott.
yes. So.
Or the gym is.
Where the gym is.
Okay.
And I was asking him what his plans were for the building and if he'd been paying attention or was familiar with the overlay and what we were talking about. And he said he was very interested and would be happy to come in and talk to us a little bit about what he's thinking. So in the sense that it may relate to our discussion about this overlay, I said, please come. So please, Joshua Wild.
Here I am.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited.
It's a great building.
Oh, it's stunning. My name is Joshua Wild. I live at 11 Horton Place here in Milton. As Cheryl just said, I did just purchase 1 Elliott Street, the Webb Mill. In the short term, I don't have any major plans. Obviously, it's all office space right now. I plan to just kind of reposition it and stabilize it. It's had some neglect over the years. There's a lot of things that really bothered me driving by it, so the opportunity to take it over, make those changes really excite me. But the long term, I do see a ton of potential there. A little bit about myself, it might help. I'm an attorney. I went to Suffolk Law, and I'm a proprietor and real estate developer. I operate out of South Boston. I own a bunch of properties throughout the city and some stuff in East Milton Square. My long-term vision for the property is really like a live, work, play model. I think it's such a stunning building, and there's so many beautiful architectural components. I love that there's a gym there. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but there's also a rear building. I really see some sort of blend of gym, some sort of co-working space, some residential component, and then I'd love to see some sort of juice bar, coffee shop, some sort of lifestyle brand that could kind of help the foot traffic there. I would love to see a brewery or some sort of component that it does have access to the waterfront, which I think is relatively unique for Milton. I would love to see some sort of like live music, pet friendly, something that kind of engages the community. It's got access to the T, it's right off the bike path. Again, this is very, very early on. I have actually no plans. This is just my longer term vision. So when Cheryl and I spoke, I said, yeah, I'd love to come be involved in the conversation and participate and see how I can add value and see if I can help move the warrant along.
I think it's terrific.
Thank you.
I live on Elliott, and a friend of mine is obsessed with not having a juice bar anywhere near here. So she's watching, which I'm sure she is. Why wouldn't she be? She would be very excited.
I walked the dog that I was babysitting
I think
today, right by the building.
I think everyone loves that building
I do
and loves
too,
what
yeah.
it contributes to Lower Mills and Milton Village. And I take that bike path, I take that trolley, I go to Milton, I'm a member of Milton Sport and Spa. And I love the building, so I'm glad that you love it as well and want to, maintain it well and value its history, which
Absolutely.
is great. Yeah, and adding more vitality is part of what the overlay district is looking to do, and looking to preserve historic buildings, not, but finding a way if that live component adds to the viability of repositioning it. That's kind of what the overlay is about. So that's why after I spoke to you, I thought, we just spoke yesterday, so thank you for coming in on such short notice.
Of course, no, I'm happy to be involved.
Yeah.
The other thing I just want to say is a co-working space I think would be terrific.
Oh, fantastic, yeah.
I can see there being a lot of demand for that.
Yeah, and I think, that's one of the things that I thought about when we had the art center, in
Yeah.
the old Kidder Library. I thought that's a real loss to East Milton, is that we don't have a space for lots of us who work, at home, work out of our houses now, and you see that more and more all the time. And there's no place that you could go to bring a client,
That's right.
There's never a seat open at Starbucks.
Yeah, well,
No.
Yeah, a lot of people have talked
And
about
sitting in
the fact-
Starbucks and talking about somebody's mortgage application is just not really a good
This is
plan.
true.
Well, even in Milton Village, there are people, they don't have a place to go for coffee.
Yeah,
If they
no,
want to
it's-
meet somebody for lunch, it's really, they can cross over, or they into Lower Mills, or they can go over to, well, not even to the Plate anymore, but, so these are, and the loss of the Plate is something that a lot of people have been talking about.
Yes.
Sure.
So I think you're actually absolutely spot on in saying that, having place for people to congregate, to go, is something people are looking for.
I agree. Yeah, my wife and I, we often leave Milton when we need stuff. So we go to Quincy, or we go to Dorchester, or we go to the city, or we go south. It's rare that we stay in Milton for what we need most of the time, which is unfortunate, so.
Which
Well, any
side of the road
questions?
are you on? I'm trying to picture where he is.
Across from the Bank of America.
Yeah.
Oh, across from that.
That's what I was doing too.
Okay,
I was like,
yeah.
what building is
So
this?
it's got frontage on Adams Street and Elliott's, that whole corner.
Oh,
there.
right that
That whole-
corner.
It's like next to
Okay.
the lofts. Yeah.
Huge.
It was part of the
brick
chocolate
building.
factory,
Yeah, the
Baker
brick-
Chocolate
Where the
Factory.
brick filled, yeah.
Yeah.
It was the web mill, so that's why they call it
Yeah.
it was web chocolate was made there first. So.
It's so pretty.
Good spot.
It's
It's
such a pretty
beautiful
building.
spot, yeah.
Yeah, it's gorgeous, and there's a ton of things that bother me. I hate the air conditioners in the front of the building sticking out the window. No one ever wanted to update the there is ductwork, there could be central AC, but no one ever wanted to update the furnaces and put condensers in. So those are little things that I can do right away.
Yeah.
Just to
Well, it
clean the
doesn't
building
look
up.
very welcoming.
No.
No.
Kind of like a fortress.
Well, in that building, and you may
Yeah.
be aware of this if you are involved in development, historic tax credits could be a good opportunity for you with that building. You could get that building landmarked. It's not a landmark district now, but you could get that individually landmarked, and then you open yourself up to opportunity for federal and state historic tax credits. And
Good thought.
I can put you in touch with people who know things about that, because I have familiarity myself, but you probably want to talk to consultants who do that kind of thing. But it would help you with restoration. One of the things I noticed as an architect was like one floor of the gym, the windows are one type, and on another floor they're another type, and of course you don't really like to do that in a historic building. They're
Yeah.
white in some places and bronze in some places. It makes little sense. But anyway, it's a great property, and
That happens with historic structures.
Yeah.
It does.
I think
different
the
owners.
synergy with the bike path is just really unique, because you're right there, and the track, the old track that's there,
Yeah.
people have done interesting things with landscape and so forth there.
Yeah.
So,
And it does, I'm not sure if any of you knew this, but it does have that concrete area where the building looks like it burned down at some point, which is, it's stunning down there. When you're down there looking at all the trees that are growing down there and here in the water, it's beautiful outdoor space. I'd love to take the opportunity to kind of revitalize that and find some useful purpose for it, so.
great.
Great.
Anything else, anyone?
No,
Okay.
that sounds great.
Well, you're welcome to stay and listen, but thank you again for coming
Yeah,
in and
thank you.
introducing yourself
Thank you.
and giving us an
Thanks
If
for
overview.
there's any way I
investing
can
in
add
our
value-
town.
Yeah.
Of course, if there's any way I can add value in the future, please let me know. Happy to
Thank
be
you.
part.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
I don't care about the gym, but the bike path, the brute club.
Yeah. Sure.
Just quiet
I
down.
see a
All right.
building is building that whole thing over in Riva.
All right,
They
folks.
are?
Oh, yeah.
That's going to be their
What?
big brewery right there.
They take the whole building?
Which one?
Reebok in
Reebok.
in Canton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I wish
yeah.
that was Milton, that piece of.
Oh, wouldn't that help?
But it'd be
Trillium.
nice. What?
Trillium,
Yeah.
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 Wow,
outdoor events.
Yeah.
good for Canton.
All right, guys.
Yeah.
One
Yeah.
thing before we
Zoning,
start on
yeah.
the, on
Could
the
get a little
zoning
loud
is
over
that
there.
I had, we had Alex Whiteside's memo, and you had made comments on it, and then I made comments back, and then I inadvertently hit reply all instead of just to you. So I called the Attorney General's office, and I hotlined today, and they said, oh, it happens all the time. And it's prior to your meeting, and you haven't, what you just need to do is make sure that you bring copies of what you did and have it at the meeting. So I have 10 copies.
For all the people that are here.
No, there's nobody left.
We're going to be discussing all
I
the
have 10
comments.
copies of the memo from Alex with Cheryl's comments and my comments back, and they're available for anybody that wants them.
Does everybody have a copy?
I have a copy. I was reading it.
Okay.
So anyway, and that's how I addressed that
Okay.
situation.
And then I sent my proposed revisions to Kevin Freitag to review. and he had a couple of additional comments that we'll get to, okay, as we go through it. And does everyone agree with kind of going through Alex's comments and the zoning kind of at the same
I don't have
time?
one with me. It would be, so.
Yeah, I'll take one of those.
Does that make sense process-wise, folks?
Thank you.
Any, do you have, I have a copy.
I think I have, I'll take the color.
Yeah, I have a color copy, so we have, Bill needs one, okay.
Thank you.
This is weird. We don't have a single person in our audience.
I know.
Oh, I know.
Wow,
They're all gonna drive down now.
10. I'm feeling good about tonight.
Right?
You just.
I feel like it's,
I know.
I feel like it's 2 in the morning.
You're only on page 1.
I don't want to jinx us.
All right.
My sister just got off the plane from Melbourne, Australia.
Oh, wow.
Picked up the dog and then drove back to Newport.
Oh, God.
So she's at 24 hours is what she's.
My goodness.
That's
Nuts.
16-hour plane ride.
That's nuts, too. Okay, so the first one of the comments is really kind of an approach to zoning where you deal with a site-specific versus an overlay that covers more sites. And, I mean, one of the things that you can see is that there are, as you saw at our last meeting, there are other people who have properties who are following this overlay and are interested in this overlay. And to design zoning for each one of them would be just unrealistic. So that my view is that we really need to be thinking about the overlay in a district. There was a lot of study as to why and which sites might be able to be redeveloped and which sites might be repurposed, like we just heard. And that it makes sense from the MPIC point of view, from MAPC point of view, and from my point of view, that we don't do it site-specific. And then as far as the existing one, it actually allows far more building, because we talked about this at MPIC. The one that is referred to here, that section 3.1, the Milton Village Central Ave Business District, PUD, that allowed the 2 atoms to be permitted, allowed for a much bigger building than what this overlay does. So, and it requires a much larger site. So it's not as tailored. It doesn't have design guidelines. It doesn't have the affordability. So much about it that's been thought about in this overlay that wasn't thought about in that one. So Kathleen offered some comments. I guess, Kathleen, you should review them publicly.
Well, as I said, as you had said before, I mean, the idea that you would just do zoning for 2 lots, or maybe 3, is just too risky to me. It's a spot zoning. And I just don't see going through all of the effort that you guys always have done on these projects, and then only adopting zoning that can only be applied to, like, 1 parking lot and the building next door. Doesn't make any sense to me. And I think it's legally risky, And affordable housing, as I said, they could have been required, when, special permits were issued in the other districts. I mean, he sort of says, well, we should be, putting in affordable housing. Well, we could have done that any number of times in the central village and never did, so.
Right, I mean, as we talked about, 88 Wharf had no requirements for affordability.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's the zoning that's being referred to here.
and and that doesn't have any at all.
So is there any, are there any other comments about this or any interest in pursuing this idea of a more limited scope?
Well, I mean, I do think that a couple people have come in and said, there are those 3 parcels, and now we have the Swift Hat House. They're talking about this doesn't quite fit them. So I do think we are going to, if you give waivers to the Swift Hat House, because now what are they talking about, going up to 5 stories on that side? So that's, I mean, you are in the end probably going to be working with each property in the end to make it.
Well, everybody applies for their own special permit.
Yeah, but
and so there's nothing here that, I mean, there are things that can be done as a right, But,
You're talking about whether the Swift Hat meets the current zoning, right? So the Swift Hat, I kind of, it wouldn't meet this proposed zoning, but they also haven't been, they've been waiting a long time to see what this proposed zoning would be. And Mike Roberts has did provide feedback to the MPIC that he felt it didn't quite give him enough. But the MPIC didn't want to change the zoning because we felt through our analysis, we didn't think other sites warranted more. And so we didn't change it, based on his comments. But his comments had been consistent. At one time, he was proposing, though, before we got going with the overlay, 16 units there in order to save the Swift Hat.
What was that last time?
9.
That was 9.
Yeah,
What,
9.
what part of it doesn't qualify for?
It's just, that site is so small that, a 60% lot coverage,
Oh, okay.
in and of itself, it just doesn't do it.
Right.
So when we did the analyses of the sites, most of them we looked at, especially the ones I looked at for new construction, were about 10,000 square feet. Because with your 60% lot coverage, that means your footprint of a building can be 6,000 square feet. And when you do 6,000 square feet, even 6,000, if you said, okay, 1,000 square foot per unit gross, so that might give you an 800 square foot net unit with, then you add the other 200 is your hallways and stairs and maybe elevator and your shafts for ductwork and everything. So you're getting like 6 units a floor. So if you think his site's 4,000 and you knock that down to a footprint, you probably can't, like they were saying, it's hard to fit the stairs and the elevator in. So that's why maybe other 3,500 square foot lots won't do it, won't pursue it. That size limit we were hoping would work, for the Swift Hat. But most like the build-out analysis MAPC did, and the one I did, based on how you fit parking and everything, we didn't see any other smaller sites that would really fall into it. So I kind of think of that one as being pretty unique, just through the analysis I've been through.
So my feeling on this is that if we do site by site, there's no consistency. This is a district, and I think we want to do something that makes sure that every product that comes online is consistent in some way, and not this year we zone for these 2 parcels, and another board 5 years from now zones for something else with a different aesthetic in mind or something, because then it'll be a mishmash. I like the idea of having one set of rules, and you're going to have outliers occasionally, I'm sure, that are going to need to follow a different path. But at least this way, you have the same set of rules for the whole district. So hopefully, whatever you see come forward is in some way consistent.
and as overlay districts go, this is pretty small.
Yeah,
It's
tiny.
not even 2 acres, is it? And we're doing all this, and it's like 2 acres. Wait a minute.
But if you look at it,
It's a business, and I'm like, I get down there, and I'm like, this is it.
Yeah, I know.
So small.
I know.
4 years.
I know, Denny.
Bigger than that.
It's like 47 acres.
Well, and the funny thing about that is too, the MPIC said, we're going to start with Milton Village because it's small and we can probably work through it pretty quickly. And then we'll
Yeah,
move
I
on to
know.
East Milton. And it was not that at all.
I thought
3
this was a
years
no-brainer
later,
when
we're
we
all
first
wearing
started talking about it. I'm
glasses.
like, why don't we do the whole
That was
district?
Joe Prondek's comment this morning, because why are we fighting mixed use? Mixed use is everywhere. Shouldn't it be in all of the business districts?
Yes,
My
So
comment
that's
was,
it's a matter of right.
we're doing this, we tried to go baby steps, take one small place. So we started with Milton Village.
So that reminds me, we did send the zoning to Joe, and Joe provided some comments to Bill, which we'll get to tonight as well, okay?
Okay.
Just a couple, right?
So we should
are we
move
good to
faster
move
then.
on with this then?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, then, we already talked about, I think, we agree the current business should be looked at, but it's not part of this article, right? Okay, so it's going to be, Allison, added to our list of potential zoning articles,
But I
right?
would say on just that point, I think that a lot of the work that we're doing in East Milton, I think is probably going to inform what we should be doing with our business districts.
Right.
Yeah. That's a good idea.
So I mean,
Not that
as far
we
as
have
like,
that many of them.
How
well,
many
that's what I mean.
business districts
We
do we
have
have?
3.
We actually have
Village.
4,
Oh, we do? What's the
Yeah.
because
fourth?
nobody realizes the one that's over on Granite Ave. right?
Oh.
2 Granite
that's a
Ave.
2 Granite
business-
Ave.
Oh, but that
Is that a
doesn't count.
district
That's a
though, or
single
just a
building.
building?
District, I
Call
thought.
it a district.
It's called a
Not
district.
space to
2
build
Granite
anything
Ave.
else. Unless you're doing a dock in the water.
Before we go
It's
too
the
far,
big
just
building, that big building?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, they can't put anything else there.
Well, I guess because certain uses can be allowed in a business district, like
Adult
adult
entertainment.
entertainment.
That's where it is, right?
or
That's where I was.
marijuana.
That's our adult entity.
Medical marijuana.
Getting frisky
Medical
to
marijuana.
granite.
Right, wait, yeah, okay.
Oh, you can put medical marijuana there? I'm sorry. I just-
Yeah,
That's,
Again, she's very excited.
yeah.
We're noticing a theme here.
All three of those things can go right there,
Put it on
right
our
next to the
board.
bike path.
pedal it off.
Yeah, I'm
You're
good.
like,
All right, we're bringing it back in here, all right?
All right.
Denny?
So we just talked about the Swift Hat Shop being sort of an outlier, and given that we're going to try to be making exceptions for him, do we want to revisit, and I know it's probably later on the list, but the sizing of the lots, it started at 3,500. Should we reconsider and maybe start higher, like at 7,500? Because you had just said most of the lots are around 10,000 to make it work.
The only thing about, for me, in that comment, is that it would take analysis again, that I need to go back through on a sort of site-by-site basis, and that would require somebody, you're looking at me, Bill.
I'm waiting for you to finish, then I'll, like,
I'm just not comfortable knowing what that impact would be yet, so I'm a little, I was hoping we could fix a few things and not have a wholesale kind of change that could affect, maybe we're only going to get half the units or half the revenue or half of potential that we thought we were going to get.
I thought you only had a couple places that had 3,500. I was thinking of the small houses on High Street, but I don't know of any on Adams that are that small except for the Swift Hat. All of them are like
The houses on the other
7,500.
side?
You mean on High
You
Street?
have to look
No,
at the
no,
map.
You mean on Adams?
Yeah, those gentlemen that have come here to talk about the overlay district, those lots are pretty small.
Yeah, and they
Not
even
one
individually
house
don't
is.
apply. They don't qualify. Bill, did you have the map which
'Cause
shows
they
the
don't-
sizes
they
of the
don't
lots
want
by
to-
chance?
They want to keep it
Yeah,
that way.
yeah, and
So-
there's nothing that makes that change.
Right, nothing changes that. The,
some of those houses over on High Street that could,
so one of the problems, I think, is that right now, you're not allowed multifamily at all. So what we're trying to do is allow some of those properties to be, you're allowed to have the pre-existing non-conforming continue, so the two-family can continue. But the zoning, the underlying zoning only allows business or single-family. So if you've got one of those properties, they're still going to the Board of Appeal, all of those properties at the end of High Street. So I think not so much that they would do this sort of mixed use like, we're talking about, but it would allow them to say, let's have that. Some of them have like, let's say it's a psychiatrist's office or a yoga office. They could have that, and then they could have 3 units, and that would conform to this zoning. So it means that you're taking away sort of that opportunity for those properties. It doesn't change the single family, the calculus, I don't think.
Okay,
Property values are going to go up.
let's hope.
Yeah. Okay, so, okay, Denny, on that now?
Yep,
All right,
I'm
and then on the, we're all fine in terms of looking at the business zoning separately, right, the underlying zoning?
Yep.
All right, and then 5 Canton Ave, I did look at this again in fact, when doing a little bit of research, I came across on LinkedIn an advertisement for this property
I saw that.
that I had circulated. And I also was looking at some of the documents that are available online, not the 60-unit scheme, but existing conditions, topographic plan, and existing plan. So I still believe the way the zoning is written, and with the photos we've seen and the historic maps we've seen, that the height measured on Adams Street is at sidewalk, not at a retaining wall top of height. And the imaging that I had done before, which has 45 feet measured on Adams Street, by the time you get around to High Street on the back, it's 35 feet. And it's a transition up on Canton Ave. So because also you're measuring the height, I mean, it's still going like this, right? You're not measuring the height up here at Canton or down here, you're measuring it right here. So already, before you even get to Canton, you've lost some of your height. I think and I didn't get a time to produce a graphic to demonstrate it. I can produce one for you if you'd like. But so that's, and then, if the other thing that restrains what you can do on 5 is the same thing that we talked about before, the lot coverage, right? So you can only cover 60% of the lot. And the fact that it does that curve around there, and when you look at it architecturally, how you lay things out, it kind of makes sense to step it, because if you did a straight line back, you have a big spot. If you kind of transition it, which breaks the scale down, then you're using some of the land in that area where the curve is. Bill, you don't have the study the presentation I did before, do
In
you?
923, I'm getting it right now.
Okay, because we might be able to see some of it in that.
So they filled in earth, and then they built on top of it. So in theory, they could, if they decided to tear down, which I'm not thinking they will, but if they decided to, they could tear down to sidewalk level and get another story in, possibly?
Not another story, it's just how,
10 feet.
so if you, I mean, if they do what he said that his study showed he could do, he'd be doing something far greater than what we were contemplating.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
But-
he's talking about transit-oriented development and Lord knows what.
Much
My
of-
comment back to this one was, Alex is sort of thinking about, well, we would cut this out. We wouldn't include Canton Ave in the district, in the overlay district. And so, he's sort of saying, well, instead of doing this zoning, we should consult with the owner and determine whether the owner has any development ideas, which might warrant some site-specific relief. Well, what we've seen is that apparently the development idea is something that Alex hadn't seen yet. Transit-oriented development for a much bigger project.
So
And
this,
Oh,
I
that's
don't know
it.
why you would wait, to sort of say, oh, we're not going to adopt zoning for this parcel because we don't know what you want to do yet.
well, what, basically my view is if he's advertising it as he's done a
Yeah.
study for 60 units, that's a
Yeah.
40B application because it's not the zoning, it's not the business. So here's what I'm talking about in terms of how the building steps. I don't know if you can see it there. It's too small. But Adams here and Canton here is that because of this, you wouldn't draw your line straight back and then you could, but by doing this, you're breaking the scale because you're seeing it and you can change your roof lines, which I did
How
in
far
the
does
street.
his property go back in that picture?
His property, or that property is to here.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I didn't know how
Yeah, it's
67
pretty-
units would fit.
it's
That's
pretty big.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like he's using up.
Well, he would be,
The whole thing's
It's big, but
covered.
it's not
Yeah,
that.
it's covered
it would
with
be,
parking.
it would be a monstrous
be big.
development to do.
I mean, right now it fits in. It's a nice transition into the neighborhood. That like Milton Hill
Yeah,
area.
except
over
for the
there.
wall of parking, but yeah.
Yeah, the parking isn't great, but I mean, the scale of it is kind
Yeah,
of
well,
nice.
apparently, whatever
Yeah.
money he's been spending on a consultant, is telling him he could do something much bigger than what.
Very big.
Yeah,
That's
so
big.
this is a view,
But isn't this Kathleen?
what's here now, there on the corner, right? Right here.
Yeah,
And then, that was the commercial that you could put there. And then, what I was saying is if it's 35 feet here, and it works its way around to 45 on the other side. And by that footprint that I was showing, that if you step that footprint, you can get breaks in that massing.
So
So-
it feels different from the street level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just one way to do it, but that's the volume of building that could be built under this overlay. And I didn't get anywhere close to 60 units, so.
So to that point, though, when we were talking about the Parkway,
Yeah.
I think you had made a comment a couple meetings ago about the fact that there is existing zoning that does allow for residential construction on that site, and that was part of our defense. To be like, there's already an allowable, so wouldn't, if we pass this overlay, that be a defense against a massive 40B also?
I think so.
And we've been working, it's not as if we're doing this in response to something.
No, I know, but I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
We would want to keep doing this because if he's thinking 67,
Yeah.
And we have nothing, we have no
somebody's going to come in and spend a
allowable
whole lot of
housing.
money and expect a lot of units.
Right.
But it's a little harder for us to defend ourselves if we don't allow
We don't
any
have some.
housing in our little business district.
Right.
Exactly.
So
No,
this is where the
agreed.
mixed use, I think, is beneficial too.
And I mean,
So-
as I said, so, and it kind of, you know, we have a master plan that we've gone through. We have tried to develop, you know, I think the Parkway, you know, was a good effort on the town's part, and this one I think is too. So I think that sort of reinforces the idea that we are allowing, you know, mixed use, and we're requiring affordables and and so.
So are we good on this one, this particular topic?
Good.
Rich and Denny, you okay with moving on?
Yeah.
The Swift Tat, I feel like we've already addressed, haven't we?
We've addressed, and we already have heard from the Historical Commission. On the,
Minimum lot size, this was the thing Denny was just
right,
mentioning.
so we've discussed that. So then we go to frontage, and there's no frontage requirement in the underlying zoning.
There's no frontage for any of the existing buildings either.
But just a quick question. So if we don't like the business zoning, is frontage one of the things that we didn't like about the business zoning?
Well, again, we have some.
We haven't looked at the underlying business zoning.
But we
I
all just
haven't.
acknowledged we don't like the business zoning, and we want to improve it. Is this a way to start improving it?
Well-
In other words, if we don't like the frontage in the business zoning, should we start thinking about what we do like? As opposed
we're
to
gonna-
saying, well, it's always been this way.
We're going to throw the buildings that are at the end of High Street out of conformance, because there are, 4 buildings that are behind that don't have frontage, Bill?
Yeah.
Yes.
But we have non-conforming things all over town.
But why do we want to change the zoning to throw things
We
into
don't make them
Those
non-conforming?
are
worse.
pre-existing non-conforming.
But there's no frontage requirement, so they don't have a problem with that at the moment.
Correct.
So we would make a new problem for them, is all I'm saying, if we did it in this district.
Sure. I'm just asking the question. I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah,
saying
no,
to do
yeah,
it.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, it's a good question.
No, it's a good
What
question.
would they have to do? If,
So that means like
Then
they
they
go
have
to
to
the
go
Board
to
of
ZBA.
Appeals
Have to go to the
again.
Board of Appeals for anything.
For everything,
so you'd be
yeah.
putting,
But they kind of have to anyway, don't they? Because isn't it already non-conforming?
Well,
Because they're,
there's some things you can do to a prior existing non-conforming. I mean, you know, you can't, you're
Have
not
more red
expanding it.
But
You
even
don't
if
have to
you
go there all
said,
the
okay,
time.
there's one building that maybe on that site, instead of a 2-family, they would have a 1-story commercial and then 2 units up above. And they might, and they could say it's consistent with this zoning, and it still might require variance, but it's kind of like, why make it more,
Yeah.
why not let them have a little opportunity, is the way I look at it, for those properties at the end.
So my comment would be, I think our business zoning is completely broken, based on allowable uses, based on allowable heights, the inability to add housing, but I don't think frontage, for me, isn't one of the things that screams out as like the first thing I would start with. You know what I mean?
okay. But don't we have to have frontage on a street? I mean, don't you have to, this sounds silly, but don't you have to have,
Well, think about 88 Wharf, where's their frontage?
well,
They don't have it.
Wharf doesn't, no.
And
No,
so that's,
and I mean, lots of times you have, you know, you have a common driveway that goes back. You don't have frontage on the street, you've got an easement, you know, we've got those kinds of, you know, lots.
think about the 2 mill buildings that are next to extra space storage. I guess they kind of have frontage if you say that the whole site's one parcel, but, you know, that's the thing about the district, it's so, the development of it was so long ago, before. And frankly,
it's
I
different
don't know if
zones.
anything meets zoning in the underlying district there. 88 Wharf meets its overlay zoning, and Extra Space Storage meets the zoning that was, that was kind of tailored to them too, but, none of them have enough parking outside of those two, let's say. Anyway, so,
Okay.
the next, the heights. Okay, so that is on, in terms of what we have.
Change that on page
two.
1, or, yeah.
Page 2. And so
Yeah, it's
here's
on one
the
and two.
reason for this. I mean, I, again, think we could do it at these heights that are in here. But after having spoken with Bill, and he reminded me that 131 Elliott, 36 Central, and 2 Adams all went back for upping the height once they got their development plans more detailed, because they needed more for structure, more for mechanicals. It doesn't make sense to require a change in zoning or variance if we can reasonably anticipate this.
We took 131 Elliott to town meeting 3 times to change the size of the first floor. 12 feet, 11 feet. We were going up and down with the first floor on it.
So this is
And
when,
they still had to go to the zoning board of appeals by the time they got their
So the
special
way,
permit.
so the way I looked at this in terms of 37, so that's in section 3C on top of page 2. The reason of making that 2 more feet is if you said that you were giving 11 feet floor to floor for floor 2 and floor 3, that's 22 feet. And if we know we're requiring 12 feet clear on the first floor, that leaves us with 3 more feet for the structure and the mechanicals. So that's, when you go and add another floor, then does it make sense to make it 47.5 feet? So
Right.
I just rounded it up to
Yeah.
the 48 feet. How do folks feel about that?
It's fine.
Good.
so just,
Okay.
so
think
you're
it's a good improvement.
accepting Alex's suggestion.
Yeah. Okay? So those are in the revision that you have. Now, on the historic preservation, we've talked about the authority, but then also, if you look at page 4, section 5, under historic preservation, I think, so in Alex's memo, number 8.3, I think the MPIC also was concerned that incentives not go to someone who tore down a historic building, even if they were not pursuing historic bonus. So that's why I added this. Okay, so it says the value of the proposed wait, that's the wrong one, sorry. It says that applications that propose removal of any significant historic element as determined by the planning board in consultation with the historical commission at a property that is included in the foregoing lists or surveys. And those lists or surveys are listed in the paragraph above, which are the National Register of Historic Places, the Massachusetts State Register of Historic Places, the Massachusetts Cultural Resource Information System, or pending nomination in good standing, the National Register of Historic Places, the Massachusetts State Register of Historic Places, and the Massachusetts Cultural Resources Information System. So, so given that, so there's those properties, it shall not be eligible for any of the bonus incentives on Adams Street. Page 4? Okay. Page 4, section 5, historic preservation.
I'm in the wrong version.
The
Yeah,
one
I
that-
feel like I am too.
Did you just get one?
This is 1-4. Cheryl Pagaya said it's at the top of mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1-4.
These are the ones with the red, right?
All right, let
Yeah.
me see, that's because I printed out my own.
No, I'm looked at it, I have it.
Where are you? Page what?
Maybe it's a different page number.
3.
Oh, you're on page 3. Okay.
Because my print is so tiny, sorry.
That's okay.
I had.
The bottom
So
of
you're-
page 3.
Page
Oh, I
3,
see, okay.
D. Is it,
So it's
The bottom of page 3.
okay,
So
5?
section
Five,
Five.
yeah,
Okay.
the red paragraph.
All right, sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
It's on the
I had
board
read it
now.
before, so I knew what you were doing. I just
Yeah.
wanted to
Okay.
follow along.
All right, so any thoughts about that?
No, it's good.
No, I think that's an improvement. I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Anything else?
Did we hear back from Kevin Freitag on authority, on any, I knew you had asked and I
Well,
had.
he-
We wanted
reviewed it
to go
previously.
through, shouldn't we just keep going through Alex's stuff and then we go back to the zoning?
Yeah, because.
That was in Alex's stuff. That's
I'm sorry, which one are you on there?
number 8. Because he wanted them to have a say.
Well, I spoke
We've
to
already
him.
talked about that.
Well, but he said he would think about it a little bit more, I think,
Yeah.
to Denny's point.
Okay.
He still had the same opinion when I spoke to him.
Okay. All right, 9.
All right,
Unless somebody else wants to talk about 8. I think we went over it.
and 9 is sort of ties into that.
That's
then,
Kevin Freitag.
right?
That's the correct, okay,
Yeah.
so, the Historic Commission has a meeting tonight, but 3 of the members actually talked to me, and they said that they do want to, weigh in on the article, and they do want to come before us and talk to us, and they do want to have some say and stuff.
Which number are we talking about?
9.
But they, unfortunately, because we don't have a historic district, they don't legally have anything to say. They can come when we do a special permit application. They would look to the Historic Commission.
We would look to them.
To have them say, but we can't require their approval or their participation. They can always participate, and we would encourage that participation.
The reason that we put the language in here was when, I've forgotten if it was Kevin Freitag or John Flynn said, the language had been that we would have to send it to the Historical Commission, and then they would have to act on it. We couldn't tell them that they have to act on it. We don't have authority to tell them they can act on it. That's why the language is may submit their comments. And we can't make an applicant be held to a process that we don't have any control over on the special permit. So those were things that were talked about before it even came here. And the same, and it came up with MPIC too in terms of more role. And that's why we encouraged them too, and the MPIC did, to pursue the local historic district study.
Do we know if anything's happened with that?
I don't know.
We
We sent our letter.
We
but-
sent
Yeah.
our letter.
Is that what we were, what this is referring to when we're talking about, because I know last meeting, folks were talking about it too, that they wanted more say or more approval.
Well, yeah,
Is
because-
that what we're talking about, or is there something
Yes.
else?
No, that's what
talking
we're talking about. But we have said before is that we can't require the applicant to go to them. They don't,
Yeah.
we can't tell another board what to do.
No,
And they don't have, right now, because there's no historic district, they don't have any
I agree,
authority
I
to
agree.
do
So I just, what my comment is going to be.
that. When they do one,
Well, so my comment is this. I know, because we talked a lot, and I'm only saying this because we talked a lot about it last meeting. We're talking about it right now. I just, like, it makes sense to go further and talk about building the historic district. Personally, I think it's not the greatest idea for the town. I mean, we've got a couple little spots, and we've got, unless they're going to start going further and changing how they build their board. I mean, if we're going to require them to have a proof, like maybe insert themselves, and now they're going to be part of that process. I mean, this is, and again, no offense to them, but that's a committee that's appointed by the selectmen. It's not they're not
Elected
elected.
body, yeah.
We don't know in 7, 8 years, 10 years from now, who's going to be on that board and what kind of experience they have. At least you don't know what kind of experience is going to be around this table, but at least the town votes us in, and we get up in front of everybody and explain why we want to be there and so forth. I really worry about all of that conversation we had last week, and I want to, and this is only my opinion, not yours, I just want to be very careful on how we advocate for getting a historic district in those areas, because I'm not a fan of it. We heard recently, members of the town, neighborhoods, came to our meeting right before town meeting and were very adamant that they don't want anybody making decisions on behalf of neighborhoods unless they're voted in and there's a process. This is not that.
Yeah, that's
And so I'd be very careful about that.
And one thing that I would say about having worked in Boston is that the Boston Landmarks Commission is staffed by historic preservation specialists. They have training degrees, et cetera. And before they even consider like landmarking a district or a building, they do an extensive study. They incorporate a lot of conversation with property owners. And then their commissions, there's a certain set of qualifications required to build their commission. So I happen to know, having served years ago when I lived in Boston on the Bay Village Historic District Commission, I was nominated by the Boston Society of Architects. And the Boston Society of Architects sends out emails to their membership and says, the city is looking for members who would serve on these boards. And so they derive some of their membership based on a set of standards that they discern. And I think we had real estate folks, maybe landscape architects, and they had, and then some from community. So it's the process that they build into that is not a process that's in our historical commission right now, that kind of process. So I think it kind of gets to your point too. If you have that kind of maybe set of rigor built in, and then they have a whole set of guidelines. So if you're going to design in that district, you get those guidelines, and then their judgment about what you're doing is based on the guidelines. They say that doesn't meet the guideline, or it does meet the guideline, and that's the basis for a decision. So it's not just somebody's opinion,
it's totally
based on
discriminatory.
guidelines.
Guidelines and the guidelines
That would make a lot of sense. I mean, we don't have a lot of geography, right, in Milton? And so at the end of the day, it's what if you ended up with a board, and again, appointed, that just happens to be, maybe it's a bunch of people in the area that don't want to see anything change, right? So then maybe you're gonna have some 40Bs fighting them. Or maybe you're gonna have the opposite. Now it's all developers on it, and they're gonna it's too much risk in there, as I've heard it. And so I'm, again, only bringing this up because there's been a lot of talk about it, and I don't want anybody watching to think that, hey, we're advocating for it. There might be people around the table that would advocate for it, but I just want to make it known, I am not.
I'm advocating for the idea of studying it.
There you go, I like that.
Right. And I think what I heard from the discussions that I've had is that they are looking for somebody from the neighborhood of whichever neighborhood is in question, and that they would be working with guidelines. And they're not talking about limiting what colors you can paint your house. It's not like a strict, like there are some districts that get a little bananas.
Yeah.
They don't want to go that extreme. They don't want to make it really difficult to improve your property. That's not what it's about. It's about creating some standards, and I think it would complicate what we do, because I think if you have somebody who has a real love for historic architecture and this and that, I personally, since I've been on the board, and I know Cheryl, I can't wait for the Shade Tree Committee to come in, because they care so much about this stuff. And I can't wait for the Historic Commission to come in, because they care so much. And when it's 10 o'clock at night and I am so tired of like Carberry or whatever it is, I'm so grateful that somebody can care and somebody can really keep the game up in town and make it like great. So I don't want anything bad to happen with the district. I don't want it to go bananas, but I do want to see, I'm excited about the idea. But
Yeah. No, for what it's worth, though,
Yeah.
and what's behind some of my other thing is, for what you said, like, that happens now. And I can remember during the Carberry, there was that, I don't remember the building, but there was a building that, wasn't in the plan to be saved, and the historic
Carriage
commission,
house.
the carriage house. And there was a lot of issue around that. Cheryl, I thought you did a great job at basically, we could have voted and moved forward on that. Our board did not, and you allowed them to work on that for a significant amount of time. That went on for a couple meetings for them to figure it out and go back and go back. And quite honestly, at one point I thought we were going to vote on it and move past it, but we didn't. And so, again, it's one of those.
Wasn't it great because somebody rescued it?
But they didn't need to
and
have.
moved it.
But they didn't need to have.
Approval.
They didn't need to have the approval authority to do that, because we allow for them to do it in every one of these processes. However, I see the opposite that could happen. What happens if the whole project went belly up because they actually didn't find a way to do it, and then they said, you know what, we're not signing off on it? I don't know legally what would happen there, but I'm afraid of that
The
too.
developer would have had to have had changed the layout. And that would have been
Yeah,
a disappointment for a lot of people, I think.
yeah.
I mean, I
But that
think-
would have been the worst case scenario, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we have to look at is, I think that what I advocated for was historic preservation was one component of the overall list of things that we needed to
Sure.
consider. You know, because that layout allowed preservation of open space and preservation of other things, and, you know, it was, that's the kind of thing, though, when it's advisory, we can weigh all of the interests, not just one interest.
I agree, yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, it's neither here nor there. I don't think it's on us to further that for them anyway. They would probably go to town meeting and ask for that approval anyway.
Right. So here, though, what we're contemplating, I mean, what we've included is that we will be consulting with them. And that, well, there may be some discussion about them liking to have more of an approval rather than an advisory role. We've been advised that that's not possible, and that we're comfortable at the moment going with their advisory role and supporting them doing a study, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so now on the parking, you know, this is something that was talked a lot about. I think when I did a presentation, I said, you know, the Masonic building has a fraction of the parking. Masonic building seems to do okay with the parking that's in the district. In fact, the parking utilization study that Beta did as part of the study showed that we have capacity in our public parking spaces in the district. So 17 Canton Ave is for sale also. And they're advertising that they have 18 parking spaces or 1.8 per 1,000 square feet of space.
Is that the office? The
It's
new office?
Yeah,
It's for sale?
it's for sale. Actually, I found out certain of these buildings are for sale because my office is looking for space. And we asked for a list.
How are you finding all this out?
I'm like, hey, 17, 5, I mean, all these things. I'm like, okay, they're for sale. I'm finding this stuff. Anyway, so the business parking, most of these sites we looked at, and here, if you're talking about half of the first floor space, and you're going to have a 6,000 square foot footprint, that means if you build 3,000 square feet of space, you know, depending upon what that use is, you know, if you said you needed 12 parking spaces, which is what the business district says, none of these sites work. We already talked about this a lot.
So my comment on this, I went back and forth with Alex about this a little bit on email. And we just have a difference of opinion, I believe. But I mean, it's very common practice that if you're doing a downtown or a town center revitalization project, you're reducing parking as part of that strategy. The 4 per 1,000, in my opinion, is prohibitive. And that's why we're not seeing, one of the big reasons why we're not seeing a lot of reinvestment in this area, I think, because it's just not feasible. There's no land to build that parking. I personally have seen a lot of towns doing this. 1 per 1,000 is a pretty standard parking ratio, especially considering we have transit right there. In Lower Mills, all the projects that they've been permitting are 0 parking spots. And some people may say that doesn't work. I think it works fine. The better example, I think, is Central Ave Business District, where there's 9 operating businesses now. I don't think I even counted the plate in that because it's not really a retail operation any longer. And there's no off-site parking, on-site parking. Everything's on the street. And I'm literally there every single day. I have literally never, in my entire life, living in this town, have heard, 12 years living in this town, have heard a single person ever complain about parking there. And I think that's a similar scale of what we're talking about in the village.
Right.
This isn't going to be Lower Mills, which is huge. So personally, I think 1 per 1,000, just on everything I've seen from the developments that I work on, is more than adequate. I think 4 per 1,000 is going to be prohibitive, and we're not going to see any reinvestment. And we're certainly not going to see the types of small businesses that I think most people are talking about wanting to attract.
Yeah, how could you do a juice bar and,
You
figure
can't.
that you could have that kind of parking?
Yeah, like that
Well-
man that was here wouldn't be able to do it.
No.
I mean, that site has, they parked a few in
Over
the
on the
back
side,
there,
but yeah.
And as a member of Milton Sport and Spa, I don't know how many people are members there, but I always find a parking space, and I go after work, right? So, or I go on Saturday or Sunday. And I might park on High, or I might park a little, not right in front, but a little bit down on Elliott, but there's never,
I've never not
never have
found
to walk
parking
through.
there. Me neither.
It depends on the type of gym that it is. Before it was this gym, it was a gym that had free weights. It was a zoo. You could not get a parking space.
There are free weights there.
Yeah, but it was a different type of gym.
It wasn't a gender neutral kind of thing?
You mean like the one in East Milton Square, like just get classes and stuff, so there's lots of people at one
They have
time?
classes at Milton
They
Hill.
have, they have classes, yeah.
It had a lot.
So,
Anyway, we're not changing parking,
Yeah.
right?
so is anybody want?
Just sort of moving a little.
No, yeah,
I
let's
know,
go.
I
Well,
want to keep.
I have some thoughts on parking,
Okay.
actually. So even, like, if we look at the Swift Hat house, right, it's changing. You want to do 9 units, right? So you're going to give 9 spaces. I don't know if there's 2 bedrooms in those units. I don't know what, we didn't get that far. But, and then we're talking about business on the first floor. Any overflow parking, if he's only going to give 9 spots for parking, I don't know how he's going to do it, because it's such a tiny little space. Anything, any overflow, any visitor, any secondary cars, they're all going to spill onto the street right there. That's going to impact the other businesses that are currently, it's going to be a huge impact right there. And that's just one property.
I think they would just use the parking lot right down below.
They will. That's where it's all going to go. But that's going to fill up pretty quick, because that little parking lot is...
But it's only 2-hour parking there.
Yeah, but it's going to fill up. It's going to, I mean, overnight. So you're going to have residential, you're going to have service, you're going to have deliveries, you're going to have I mean, it's all,
take a
we're
side
talking
job.
about adding 156 residential units if the build up, that's the max, right? In 2 acres. And you have DE and F rated intersections there at the different times of day. And like I was thinking about in East Milton, I go to a restaurant or something, I don't know where, I'm like, where do I park, I'm driving around. And just like Steel and Rye, you end up parking far away and walking, so it's gonna go into the neighborhoods behind it. So it's gonna, I mean, it's gonna have to go somewhere, because those little places are gonna fill up really fast.
So I think that we should consider this a TOD development, transit-oriented development, and all the research shows, and there's abundance of research. Maybe we should pull some up. Actually, I need to figure out how to get my APA membership, because I found some great documents on there. The people that are attracted to those developments are not car people.
Right.
So the people that live there, even if it is 2-bedroom, aren't going to have 2 cars. They're just not. Because people that want to live in a car-centric environment are not going to move to the multifamily housing right next to the train.
Can I just add on to that
Yeah.
real quick? The analysis that I did in the presentation that I did in September, the build-out square footage is basically less than the size of 88 Wharf. And 88 Wharf has how many units, Bill?
73.
73 units. So what we're talking about is building smaller units. And all of the data supports that the smaller units, there's less cars. And part of it really has to do with, as you said, who's going there. In some of the research I was looking at for some additional data, there was a study done that says that by eliminating 1 car from a typical household, a family's budget, they can afford a $100,000 larger mortgage because of the cost of not having the cost of that additional car. And one of the people who spoke a lot to this in terms of 1 car is actually a member of the Master Plan Implementation
Liz, she was
Committee,
at the last
Liz.
meeting.
Has spoken about this a lot. They're a 1-car household and 2 professionals, and they
I see
make.
your husband waiting for the bus every morning.
Yeah. And so it's really, and it's something interesting too, like people say, well, Milton, there's a lot of cars. And I looked up, and I'm amazed I was able to figure this out, but US Census data for 2018, and I found that, that there are actually 559 households in Milton that have no car available.
Was
And
in the
that
ACS?
there are,
Is that in the ACS?
Yeah.
data? Yeah.
and that there are 2,362 units where there's 1 vehicle available. But if you jump across to the Dorchester 02124 area code, those stats are 6.3% no vehicle and 26.6% one vehicle. The Dorchester 02124, no vehicle is up to 30%.
Wow.
And one vehicle is 40% of their.
This is sort
So
of
it's the people who chose to live across
That's what I
the
was gonna say.
street because
Yeah.
they have options for that and they don't have vehicles. It's the same thing I found professionally where we've done work just outside of Ashmont Square and the neighbors said, build less parking than one per unit and keep a bunch of zip cars for us. Because they could get to the train and then they could get a zip car or a car share, as we've talked about, when they need it. And younger folks, my daughter included, they're taking Uber or Lyft, and she's 21, doesn't have a driver's license yet. So it's, the demographic is a lot different than a lot of people associate if they're thinking of themselves as being sort of midlife family with needing to get kids hauled around and need 2 cars.
They're not
But that's
gonna
not
live
the demographic. They're going to live in the single-family houses. That demographic's going to live in the single-family houses.
Well, that was going to be my comment. I'm a car person. I probably shouldn't say that out loud. That's probably poo-pooed in this world. But I drive everywhere. I would never buy a house a place that didn't have a parking space. I just wouldn't. Or I wouldn't rent a place that didn't have a parking space. Even when I lived in Southie, I bought a house that had a parking space. So it's not like every single person we do this type of lifestyle. This is, if you have 1 parking space per unit, the people that live there are the people that are going to understand that, and that's their choice.
And on the residential side, we don't have any overnight parking, so it's not as if, like in Boston, it flows onto the streets because they have overnight parking. So you say, okay, you're only going to provide 1 or a half per unit, but you're going to still be parking on the curb. Well, in Milton, you can't do that. You can't park on the street
Planning board
overnight.
brought forth an article several years ago to allow parking on Adams Street. And-
Overnight?
Yes, in Milton Village, and I can't find it. I don't
remember.
remember what year it was.
Yeah.
So if it's, because you said you can't remember it, I'll go back further than that.
All right,
I
so,
guess my comment would be, I don't agree with the comment about business parking. I think 1 per 1,000 is standard protocol for the location.
I agree.
And I also think 1 per unit is more than sufficient.
the one thing I would comment also is that those are minimums, and if a developer feels like to meet their market need, they need more spaces, then they're going to provide more.
Yeah.
Just like that, I told you that project that I was doing outside Ashmont. The developer said, you may say 0.5 per unit, but I want 1 per unit because I think I need 1 per unit to rent these units out or to sell these units. And so the developer's going to build they're not going to build something that they can't rent or sell.
Right.
They won't be successful. So
This is the minimum, not the
this is the
maximum.
minimum. We don't have a maximum. In fact, some
No,
places
but
put a maximum
I was just
in.
going to say, to limit parking, and they're usually transit-oriented development
Yeah.
areas, they adopt a maximum because they don't want a bunch parking. They want this to be a pedestrian-friendly location
Right.
and a transit-friendly location.
So any other thoughts?
Well, I have 2 30-ish-year-olds who live in New York City, and they both have cars. So I know people bring their cars, even though, and they move them around during the, I have to put them on the opposite sides of the streets and everything. I lived in Somerville for a number of years, and I had to keep moving my car and walking 3 blocks home, and I know a lot of people do that. So they're going to be bringing cars, and we're going to have to deal with it.
But I also, you might recall that in that presentation, again, I made some calls to the property owners, the multifamily property owners that gave me some data, and the Baker Chocolate Apartments just across the river from Milton in Dorchester, they have 0.7 spaces per unit in their rentals, and she said they have adequate parking. And the condo across
And so does the condo.
The condo across the street has more,
Yeah.
but it's still, I have
Are
to
they
go back to
full?
my data.
Are they full? The rentals? No.
I mean, those are, the condos are all sold.
They're all sold.
Yeah, and you get, you can buy a parking space with a condo, but there's more parking spaces than are used there.
And the Milton
You
Hill
go out
House.
out to the back to when it heads off to Central, That's all sort of extra visitor parking.
Yep.
I've never had an issue finding a parking space there.
So the Milton Hill House, they have 1.5 spaces per unit, but they're two different buildings, have two different demographics, they told. So the older building has, I would call maybe empty nesters, so an older population. The newer building has young professionals who commute a lot, she said, by trolley. So
So that's on the Dorchester line?
no,
It's
that-
just-
No,
so
that's
that's
all on
the-
the-
that's
Crossing
the-
Steel and Rye kind
That's
of.
Oh,
the
okay.
new one on Elliott. They
Oh, right
have
there.
the two buildings here.
Oh, okay.
What number were you on? 10?
So that's 10 on the parking. And I just wanted to mention one other thing. It says that the provisions are retained, there need to be specific standards set out in the zoning. The zoning does require professional studies, so to show the adequacy. So if the developer, that's a requirement.
My one last point, I've already made it before, but I just think that it would be nice if we asked for more than you may need, so we can always waive it down, because we can't ask for more, can we?
We
Can
can't waive it
we
down.
can't require-
You can't knock it down.
No, like when they come before us for a special permit, if they had a good reason for asking for us to require less parking.
We would have to send them to the Board of Appeal for a variance because we don't have leeway in the zoning. It's not like it's a rules and regs standard where we have leeway to issue a waiver.
So then we definitely can't ask for more parking. So if somebody came in and they wanted, we wanted more, we can't. Okay. Once we give it away, it's gone. That's my point.
So I think we should probably get some, maybe you can help us with this, figure out some research on transit-oriented development
Absolutely.
patterns, standards, and some representative samples, because I think that might help inform the discussion.
You may recall too that MAPC, I think I distributed some time ago.
We've got, there's stuff on that all tomorrow. I mean, we've got stuff
I-
all over the place on parking.
I distributed this when we first started talking about this in the fall, and maybe you can check your emails. It's called the Perfect Fit Parking Initiative.
Page is that?
In this document, sorry, there's no page numbers.
So it's Perfect Fit Park, could I Google that, Perfect Fit?
Yeah, it's MAPC. It was
Oh.
issued last July.
I read the report that Allison sent.
But I have a few other,
Family
I have a few other
The
things
MAPC
that,
thing?
I have a few other things that, resources that I was looking at I can share too. I didn't have them ready for tonight.
So I think 10 through 15 are all parking related.
Yes.
And 15 was the one on Zipcar, which you made the change.
Yeah.
wanna
And I
talk
agree
about
with that.
I'll get questions about 12.
That's the document you're talking about, Cheryl.
I had a
Yes.
comment on that one, in that you're trying to require those off-site parking be deeded
Yeah.
parking.
No, I know, I read your, it makes a lot of sense. I just
And I-
haven't, I don't want to skip 11 though.
Yeah, okay.
You want me to, can I ask mine now, or?
Yeah,
Wanna go to
Yeah,
11
yeah,
first?
just from looking at the watch going.
Right.
Okay. Let's see.
So I agree, so it makes a lot of sense what you said, Kathleen. My only comment though is I agree with what he wrote. I'm not necessarily saying that, so here's the rub I have. So in East Milton Square, this same thing happened when Novara was going in. It was, you needed the correct amount of spaces. So they're in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals. And what the applicant said is, I've got some across the street behind Citizen Bank. I've got some at the church. I can park my employees over at the funeral home. And we're going to use some of Abbey Park at the afternoon. And my question is, I mean, I'm a fan of Novara, but my question to, I think it was Mary McKettrick was the lawyer. How are you ever going to, like you're going to give people a pamphlet when they drive up and say, here's where you can park, and there's 7 places to choose from? I mean, it's not going to happen. So what ends up happening is they do drive and park illegally or in the wrong areas, or it just, they park in front of people's.
They have valet parking.
They don't have valet parking. They have none.
I've seen the sign out
They had
there.
it for like a week when they started it. They don't have valet parking.
Well, when everybody talks about parking, I do kind of remember that. I mean, I live in the neighborhood as well. I live on a public street. and people are allowed to park on a public street.
That's not my point.
No, but I mean.
Point is in the
That's
zoning.
where I end up.
So people park
I
in
end up
front of
in
my
your
house, so
neighborhood.
fine. I mean,
So I'm fine with
that's
that.
kind of the way the law goes. I park in front of other people's
But
houses.
you're answering my question with a different, the point is within the zoning, you need a certain amount of parking, right?
Yeah.
So to say that it's going to be down the block and around the corner is complete bull. Because nobody knows where it is.
So,
That's me.
Rich,
So I do not
That's
agree
me
with that one
driving
bit.
around.
so do you know that 88 Wharf's restaurant parking, they were allowed to count the municipal lot?
Yeah, there's a
and
lot wrong with
curbside-
that.
And
development. I
curbside
wasn't part
parking?
of that. so.
No,
No, but all I'm
Yeah.
saying is that all of the restaurants in town, none of them can provide parking on site.
know, it's
So
crazy.
it's an accommodation
It's
and
not,
that, in order to have the amenity. I hear
No, I
what
don't
you're
want to,
saying.
I don't want to speak for anybody, but from what I've heard is when we were sitting there in front of the zoning board of appeals and they said, well, we've got an agreement, and what I'm concentrating more on this statement is the agreement, in quotations. They said, we got an agreement with the church, we're allowed to park there. A year later, I remember asking somebody at the church, do they have that agreement? And the answer was no, there's no agreement. And so it's very easy to walk in and say, hey, I got an agreement. We just have an agreement, they're saying that I could park there. He has a point to say that's, I mean, really, I'm putting words in his mouth.
But it
that's-
says
it's shaky.
in our zoning says the parking agreement has to be submitted with the site plan requirements. So you have to provide the agreement.
Okay,
What he was saying is that it needs to be deeded.
agreed, and that's why I said I agree
And
with
I'm
your
saying,
comment.
no, not deeded, but we say right here in the off-site parking that you have to come in with your parking agreement. Now, that's a failure on the part of like the Board of Appeals, of which I used to be a member,
It
just
was.
not follow
You weren't
up.
there that day, I
And
know that.
not follow up, I didn't
I
hear that
was.
one, but not follow up and say, where's the agreement in writing? So if we say, if
Yeah.
you're gonna come in before this board and say, I'm gonna be doing this restaurant and I don't have any place to park and I'm either having people bungee jump in or they're parking in France,
Yeah.
then we wanna see the agreement that says, here's the parking lot in France.
So, I guess my question.
But we don't want the parking lot in France or 3 blocks away.
Well, so,
We want it
so,
like
but
nearby.
Yeah.
my point though is, or my question, and it's not really I don't, let me start by saying this. I'm not asking for anything to be changed.
Yeah.
I see an issue in the town, and it's happening over and over again.
Yeah.
Where somebody comes in and says, yeah, I have an agreement.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and actually it was funnier because they said, we're gonna park at Abbey Park, and it was almost like Abbey Park said no, and it's like, well, now it's yes. It's the same owner, right?
Yeah.
They're gonna park there. And so now there's an agreement. But then there was some weird agreements with
Yeah, I agree.
neighbors. And I don't remember ever seeing a document, but maybe there wasn't a written agreement. But the point is, I guess my question is, what happens when that gets thrown away because they just sold that property? Now there is no agreement. And if you're going to have zoning, I'm fine with 1 per 1,000, but you still got to have that one.
But
You know what
one thing
I
I
mean?
want to say is a little bit different about the process is, that's a Board of Appeal process that doesn't, it's not tied to any zoning or special permit with the planning board. Where here, we put in the zoning that in the event of a restaurant use without a bar area, 1 parking space shall be provided for each 4 patron seats in the restaurant, or such lesser number determined to be adequate for the particular restaurant use by the planning board, considering all relevant circumstances. So we're not kicking it back to the Board of Appeal. We're saying that we will make the judgment about the restaurant.
Okay.
The need of a
So
restaurant.
what you're saying is we can take care of that at the time?
Yeah.
Okay,
And I think we should.
Thank
In the special permit.
all right.
Yeah.
So-
Then I'm fine with it.
You had said something about a long-term lease. So Alex said deed, but you said how about a long-term lease? So
We
are
could
you
do
okay
it,
with it?
yeah.
You're okay with that?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm okay with a
But see,
long-term
the
lease.
deeded parking is a huge issue, because it's a real estate concept that is, it's an easement in gross is what they're called, and they're a problem because they're not tied to the actual real estate that you own. It's just a mess.
I think long-term lease, I don't really like a license or agreement
No,
because
but
I
I
think those
wouldn't-
go out the window. But a long-term lease sounds much better to me,
Well, except that
personally.
why would I want a long-term lease when I don't know my restaurant might not last that long?
All I cared about was somebody coming in and saying, yeah, I've cobbled together, I'm gonna park 3 people over here and 5 over there.
Well,
seven-
as
Let me also just point
we
something
have
else
said
out.
in other special permits is that, you come in when the nursery comes before us, they have to show, they have a report, that says, okay, here's our parking, and here's our parking agreement, and our
Yeah.
parking agreement is still in place. The special permit, whatever, is
makes
for
sense.
however 3 years, and you gotta renew it, you gotta come back in and show that you've got it.
I just
let
want to make
me-
one more point, though.
Yeah.
Novara did come before the planning board. That parking was approved by the planning board.
They were in front of the the zoning board of appeals did say, we want to hear the planning board weigh in. I was at both those nights.
But there was a permit issued by this board
Site
that
plan
allowed
approval
that
permit.
permit, that allowed that parking plan.
It was a crappy plan.
So I'm just saying, but that's in a four per thousand requirement
Yeah.
in a business district that had all these extra things, and it's,
Well, fix that is what I'm saying. But
I
what you
agree.
don't do is say, I'm going to park people down the church, and I probably didn't even ask them yet.
So I just want to point one other thing out. 88 Wharf, again, that restaurant, they've had amendments to their special permit a couple of times to addressing parking. At one time, they were required by the planning board to lease 20 spaces from the MBTA to be used for the parking. They came back to the planning board and said, we don't need those 20 spaces. We want to be relieved of that obligation to do that lease. And the planning board granted that. I wasn't on the board at the time. I read through all the documents Bill sent me when I was doing the research on it. So there is opportunity, to come back and amend their special permits. But, I mean, maybe they weren't as successful as Steel and Rye in terms of parking. But, I think the size of buildings we're looking at here, I doubt you'll get another big restaurant, except maybe at 2 Adams. I mean, it's possible, but maybe one of these larger sites would get it, but not like we're going to get 3,
But
4,
2
5
Adams has
restaurants.
more land to do parking.
Yeah, right. They can do it there.
Yeah.
I
and
mean,
a
they
more
can
favorable
accommodate.
grade, because you
Yeah.
can put it underneath.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, and I think you've said this, you've told me this answer in another meeting. So Starbucks, the parking lot behind Starbucks, what was done to that property to get them to allow public?
They were supposed to have 4 per 1,000, right? Because they're a restaurant.
Change of use. Change of use, and they put a second story on the building.
And so, so the planning board or somebody at the time said that you're going to allow, because it's public parking, right? For the most part?
I don't
Shared
think so.
parking.
It's what?
Shared parking with the community.
Shared
It's
with the
writ-
community, so that's how what's called.
We're going to have, say, shared
like
park.
that, to be
We're
honest
having
with you.
shared parking with 131 Elliott,
Okay.
Yeah.
That outdoor parking lot is shared. It's
Good.
business.
18 spaces,
Yeah.
right?
Right. I just think we
X
should,
amount of those spots are.
whenever
It's the same
appropriate, we
thing.
should be thinking about that, because I got to tell you, you couldn't even park in East Milton around that area if they didn't do that. I mean, it would be a disaster. Can you imagine anybody even finding a way into Starbucks without that, right? I wish more properties did that.
So I think, what we're saying is that we can address some of this in our special permits. Let's just like we
Yeah,
go through a lot of
yeah.
detail in our special permits,
Okay.
we would address it. I do want to point out, in the business parking, we talked about this last time, that it referred back to section 7C, which triggers the 4 per 1,000 again.
Right.
So what I did was took all of that out. So there's a lot of crossed out, but that's what it's referring to. Anybody have a question about that? Okay. I think that's it on parking then, is that right?
I think you should mention the zip car change.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Rich, that was the zoning board of appeals.
Oh, well,
And we didn't go through the
it was
one
great.
spot per 4 restaurant patrons.
Yeah,
That's what we were
did.
just talking about.
Just talked about
That-
I'm sorry, I thought we were talking about 1 per 1,000.
That was in here, it's still in here, one,
Well,
what's
for the
required.
record, I think it should be at least 2 per, like, 1 spot per 2 people as opposed to 4, because people show up in, a lot of people show up in one car per person for 4 spots.
Well, the
But
idea is some will walk and some
we
will
used
take
to
them
have
back.
families show up 4 in one car, but now that, tell me about it.
My
Now
family-
no one
My
talks to
family, we
anyone.
do.
Nobody does. Everybody's got their own radio and they don't want them in the car.
I gotta be honest, I'm starting to change my opinion on it as well. Like, I have a bunch of people that work for me across the country. When I got an apartment when I was 22, 23, I had an apartment, I'm a car person, I had at least one by myself, and maybe there was something else there too, but I mean, and I didn't know who my neighbors were. I left to do everything. I've got people that work for me that are around that age. They're living in these high-rise buildings, and they get together with their neighbors on the roof decks at night, and they network all day, like night, and they party, and some of the people that work for me, they don't have cars. I'm like amazed at like how, like, they don't even want to own a home, and I'm like, wow, you guys Gonna save a ton of money.
Yeah.
Like, I'm kind of envious
Why didn't
of
I think of
that idea. 'Cause all I want is a yard, and I want to have all this debt, and they're like,
Well, I don't know, renting
I'm
can be
amazed.
debt.
No,
Rent-
I-
mean, there's
Yeah.
amounts, yeah.
I didn't get
So-
my driver's license till I was in law school.
Oh, yeah? Nice.
Well,
Didn't need it.
My
When I
21-year-old
first-
doesn't have hers yet either.
I
When
had a
I first-
military ID because my dad died in the service. So
Oh.
that was my ID for getting into restaurants and bars.
Nice.
Didn't need a driver's license.
Oh, wow, yeah. Yeah, she Ubers everywhere.
well, when I first moved to Boston and I had a car that I brought with me and I didn't have a place to park and I was living in the Back Bay. It was stolen twice and I said, I don't want a car. And I got rid of my car.
Yeah, my sister was the same way.
Okay.
All right, so, let's see, we talked,
Well, I'm sorry, but on 13, I do think giving up visitor parking, service parking, and one spot per bedroom is going to be a loss, but I know I'm in the minority on that.
I think before we go to, did you, Rich said you didn't want to pass, okay, 11 and 12, never mind, we talked about those. We talked about the residential, we just have differences of opinion on what.
Yep.
On 14, going back retroactively, it's just not done.
And I had made the comment that, town boards aren't bound. If you make a decision once, doesn't mean that you have to make that same decision the next 37 times.
Right.
And so there's case law that sort of says that,
Precedent is everything.
precedent means absolutely nothing. And then, and reducing parking for other projects that are outside the overlay district is beyond the scope. He's talking about looking at Central Avenue.
Different overlay,
And that's a different overlay.
right.
And so we can't do anything about that. That's beyond the scope of this one. And I think, and
I
as
think
said,
that I do understand though
timing's
that,
different.
that projects that are similar, they do tend to look at other projects that are similar. And so precedents do get set and they do get looked at.
And not
but
by
it's not-
case law is what I was trying to say.
Right, we don't have to do them. I agree with you, we don't have to, but it does end up happening. Just, it's like a social thing that
Well,
happens.
yeah.
Well, that's my argument against the 4 per thousand commercial requirement, actually, is Central
Yeah.
Ave, which doesn't have any commercial parking. It will when 131 Elliott is constructed, but today it doesn't. And it works very well.
Well, yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's okay. I'm just saying it's a similar.
I think we're going to have something interesting happen too, when 131 Elliott's going to come online with their units and there are a lot of parking spaces required there. It'll be interesting to see if they
And
use
new
all those.
retail
They have,
bays.
so how many parking spaces do they have per?
18 public.
They have 87 parking spaces
Yeah, see,
for 36 units
Yeah.
my reason for
38
not wanting.
On the train.
next to the train.
Literally.
And with, 4,000 square foot of commercial?
Yes. I don't want to sound like I'm talking out of both mouth. When I say we don't have parking in certain areas, it's because we've already got the use. And it seems like it's, disastrous and you got to find parking or you got to create parking. This stuff hasn't happened yet, some of this that we're proposing. And the reason why I like the idea of the smaller requirement is because now you're saying, don't have a family live there. Have a single person that's commuting to Boston working.
Well, that's the thing. So
And
Miss
then
Milton
you're
has
not
a bunch
gonna
of
have-
single-family houses, and then a commercial
Yeah.
district. It doesn't
Right.
compute. They don't match.
Right,
Because it wasn't thoroughly planned out that way.
right.
Of course not.
I mean,
So that's why I think that's the argument too for the district planning initiative.
Well, the business, yeah, well, for East Milton's different. I mean, the business district kind of, it changed over time, and it massively changed.
so, I mean, one of the things, again, just go back to sort of what are the ideas, the people who are going to buy here. I know one of the people who kept coming to the MPIC meetings and saying he was supportive of this. He and his wife were very supportive of it. He told me recently they just sold their house and they're moving to Canton. That's where they're downsizing because there's product there. So, and this is someone who's been a town meeting member, very active, he and his wife both, in a lot of things. So, it's just, these are the kinds of folks who want to be able to stay in Milton. There's not product available
There's a
to them.
friend of mine who is a longtime Milton, born here. And mother was a town meeting member, whatever, moved to Hyde Park.
I mean, the other, not to go down this
Can't
road too
get
far, but
the-
the other side of it is, it's the idea of, like, everybody's moving to electric cars, but electric cars, there's still one in each, there's one car in each driveway. The idea of the future is, let's have less cars, and people start taking transit, and local communities, and, you know what I mean? So, I mean, I sat through one of those conferences recently, and it was.
It's the car, when you need a car, it comes to you?
Well, it's the idea. They showed a picture of.
I love that.
Picture of like an old picture of lots of people walking in the street in big trolleys, and you saw no cars. And it's the idea of, let's get back to that day,
Yeah.
because then you have less cars, and you have.
Apparently,
I'm all good with
I
that.
mean, again, sort of my Paris vacation, but the mayor is really working on making Central Paris car-free.
Yeah.
They're not there, obviously, yet, and they just have a huge transit strike, so that complicates things. But but it's something other places are reckoning. I mean,
Oh,
they're
yeah.
dealing with, it's just so much of it.
And this is what makes me so sad about the plate in Central Ave, is that there would be droves of people from the neighborhood
Yeah.
walking
Well,
there.
it keeps
Walking
you
there.
there, and you don't
And
have to
people
drive.
want to come, and then you run into people, and then you're sitting down and having coffee,
Right.
and you're chit-chatting, and it's like, it was awesome.
I know, it was great for the bike path too.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
Well,
So
Paris
hopefully
has
you'll see
great
that in the
biking,
village,
bike
where right now you
paths,
go on a Saturday
and it's
morning.
private.
Dead.
Yeah.
Not
You
at
feel
all.
safe.
I do it
you're
in my
not
neighborhood. We walk
competing.
to the.
They're
Yeah,
really-
it's awesome.
And London
That's good,
Tube,
that.
I mean,
Okay, can we just
Yeah,
move
we're
this
supposed
stuff?
All
to
right,
end
so,
at 9:30.
all right, guys, sorry.
Yeah, we're
Let's,
done, right?
Zipcar, we made the change.
Okay.
Which was a good suggestion.
There are studies required, okay? No adverse impact studies are required. So I guess, here, the idea is that they should have to revise their project. I mean, I suppose that's implied, right? The planning board, if we find that there's an
Yeah.
adverse impact, we're going to require them to revise their
Exactly.
application like we
Yeah.
do in other situations. I'm not sure we need to be more explicit.
I don't think so.
Okay. And then on the affordable housing, Kathleen sent language that we have in front of us.
On page 6 of the revised zoning. So on that, what I did was to say that perpetual deed restrictions, and if applicable, we had made that change before, a regulatory agreement, because you don't get those all the time. Ensuring permanent affordability. These units would be affordable to households whose annual income should not exceed 80%. I took out "and occupied exclusively by," because if you do a condo and you sell it to an affordable buyer, they could hit the lottery tomorrow, and they're still in an affordable unit because they bought it. So the restriction affects the sale of the unit. Now, in a rental project, though, there is an annual monitoring to see that you still meet the income eligibility for the rental units. But in a first sale, that's not the case. So I took out "and occupied." They just have to be affordable. Because I said, we had a situation years ago with somebody in Weston who had an affordable unit and hit the lottery, and it was a condo, and his condo
That
fee
really
was
happened.
$150 a month, and everybody else was $1,800.
Oh, my God.
You get to keep it?
Yeah, well, because
my
he
God.
bought it. That's the issue about,
When he sells it, then.
it's only when he sells it. Can only
I would never.
so when he sells
I
it,
know.
it's affordable again to the
Yes,
next
to
purchaser.
the next person.
And
He
you can
could live
only
there his
make
whole
a certain
life.
amount of money on the sale, right? Isn't
Yeah,
that, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So it's capped. You couldn't take this affordable and sell it for $2 million.
No.
And he can't sublet it. He
No,
can't do
you have to
that.
be owner occupied.
Oh.
That would be terrible, wouldn't it?
So I took out occupied, exclusive by household.
Matter if your neighbor was something.
Yeah, and then I defined the district, so we didn't have to waste time figuring out which one it was. And for household size, so I just cleaned up the language there, and the units will qualify for the DHCD's subsidized housing inventory. And I took out the sentence that says units shall be subject to use restrictions to ensure there remain affordable housing stock, because I already have that up above, and shall be sold or rented on a fair and open basis. All these units that are affordable are all done through a marketing plan, so we don't need to say that.
Yeah, the state describes.
Exactly. All affordable units shall be integrated. I just moved that. It was sort of in a
I
weird
added that, but you
position.
moved it up, yeah.
I moved in a different position so that they have to be part of the project. They can't be like such cheap seats or a tent in the back, that sort of thing.
I changed what I had intended, not the word compatible, I meant that to be comparable.
She's thinking
too
affordables are in the
punchy here.
basement.
Exactly.
Boiler.
Right. And then I said, so here's my problem with actually, with sort of Alex's comments too, is that we want to make sure that we get these affordable units. But if it's a condo, the restrictions imposed when the deed writer is signed with the deed to the affordable buyer, they can't close if there isn't an occupancy permit. So you can't say that I won't give you the occupancy permit until I get a copy of the recorded deed writer, because that can't ever happen. I can't close without an occupancy permit. So I think, so this language, I mean, that works for the rental, but it doesn't work for the homeownership one. So I just sort of said the final occupancy permit wouldn't be issued until we got the affordable housing restriction. So if you had a project that, let's say you had 10 units and one of them's affordable, you wouldn't get the final occupancy permit for any of the market ones until we knew the affordable was on.
That makes sense.
I just wanted, there's a holdup, but I just didn't want it to make it impossible for an affordable buyer to buy a unit.
Right.
So I like that you took out insofar as reasonably possible, because I want it to be required. So the language.
Yeah, I didn't know, we want to have them count. And the other thing is that I wanted to make flexibility because, group homes count on the SHI. You can do other kinds of things that, that count on the SHI. And so I didn't want to have us limited by saying it had to be a regulatory agreement, which is only when you do financing.
Okay.
So
Makes sense.
I just try to simplify it.
All right. Any questions about that? Okay. And then next is number
18,
Yeah,
18.
we talked about that.
I think we did too.
We would send it there, so does it really need to have anything more specific? That
No.
No.
18, we just,
Okay.
Well,
So then
in 18, that would be section 14. Should we have a provision for the town's affordable trust review, any fees or anything?
I don't think,
'Cause wouldn't we want, like, when an applicant comes, we would want to alert the Affordable Housing Trust, and then any fees or anything that, we don't know what the Affordable Housing Trust is going to require yet, because we don't have their formulas and things.
Well,
So if they run, you know how we go through a checklist when a new special permit, I would think the Affordable Housing Trust would be on that checklist, and whatever they require.
so one thing, and Danny, just in thinking about that, like, we don't necessarily have in the zoning every entity that we send the application to in the zoning, even though we have it on a checklist.
Right.
So I'm not sure we need to add it in there. I mean, we would say it could be part of our checklist. And so,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, the zoning.
I don't think it has to say it in here. I mean,
One of the other things, I think it kind of ties back to what I said earlier about the historic, is that we can't bind another volunteer committee to a schedule or an action. I mean, we can ask, but an applicant, applies to us unless there's a separate regulatory requirement of them, like Conservation Commission. We have to manage the rest of it. That we're responsible for this special permit, right?
yeah, as I said, I think you just can't. I mean, that's just what John Flynn said. You can't require the Affordable Housing Trust.
It's comparable. I didn't ask specifically about that. It's comparable to the historical.
Yeah, but they are,
commission.
I mean,
But I
they're sort
think
of
as far
separate.
as process, like,
Oh,
I
yeah,
don't know
yeah,
about
yeah.
the language here, but I think we would, I guess you probably already do this. An application comes in and you share it with the Historic Commission and you share it with the Affordable Housing Trust, and that gets checked off before it even gets to the planning board's table.
Yeah, that
If
should
you-
be.
Right, that would be on the, okay.
Yeah,
Those are requirements in the board's rules and regs.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so then on the standards and the comparability, MPIC did talk about standards and how there really should be some standards. And I do think it makes sense that somebody shouldn't get a comparable bonus for something district improvement unless it's, the three are kind of comparable financial, or you won't get something, you're only going to get the least expensive one, right? So if we come up with a formula that works for affordable housing, then you match that, was sort of an initial thought I had. Kathleen had some other thoughts, and one thing, I mean, if you look at the affordable housing section.
Not the,
Not-
no, you want to be back to the incentives on
No,
page 3?
I want to start with the affordable first, because the affordable first,
Are you at 4A?
I'm trying to find where it is, sorry, just give me it's 7. Okay, so in 7,
What
Yeah.
page? What page now?
Page 6.
Page 6.
it says, in a Milton Village mixed-use PUD, 10% of the total housing units computed to the nearest whole number shall be affordable housing, and then on it goes, right? So it
Yeah.
doesn't say here that you can do it off-site, it doesn't say you can do a payment in lieu for that 10%.
Right,
But then you go to the incentives,
right.
and the incentives say, on the affordable housing one, that
Are you 4?
now back to the
3.
3,
Back- 3.
4B.
4B.
D.
4B, it's saying that you can get this bonus floor if you have an additional 5 to 10%. And the reason the percentage was put in was to allow for a different size site, because a small site, it might be hard, because you're not getting that many more units on that floor. But here we're saying, and this is, so how does everybody read that last one? Do you read it that only the bonus can be a contribution? Or do you read it that everything could be a contribution? Because I read it one way and Kathleen read it another way. And I just want to see how you read it.
So 4B, the last sentence says, eligibility for the bonus requires between 5 and 10% more than the 10% baseline affordable housing unit requirement, with the increase in proportion to the scale of the project and/or a contribution to the town's affordable housing trust.
How do you read that? Do you read that no matter what, you're putting 10% on site and that you're only allowed your additional as a contribution? Because that's the way I understood it. But if the language isn't clear, we need to,
Yeah, I don't think that's clear.
okay. So that's what Kathleen thought. She didn't think it was clear.
I got it, but
All right, it's two of us.
no, it could because I knew too much.
Well,
We
so
want it to be clear to
so-
the average bear.
we want it to be clear to the
average
applicant.
citizen.
And an applicant,
For an
yeah.
interpreter,
Yeah.
Yeah.
other than us.
So does anybody have some suggestion on that?
No, and I can't think straight.
No.
Yeah.
All right, so here's the other thing.
Just
Do we
put
want
a star next to it. I
Okay.
think we should come back.
All right, so here's the
On another
thing,
night.
on a decision.
Are we
Do we want, just think about this too, if you're going to think about it. Do we want to allow that to be a contribution, or do we want all of the units on site?
I would like the discretion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
Yeah,
I've
discretion
heard-
for a contribution. So it could be either or, but would it be, I think it should be up to the planning board, not necessarily the developer.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, of course.
It's
yeah.
an,
I
all
agree
right.
with that 100%.
I think it's that way already, isn't it? It says at the discretion of the planning board.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that it's only the additional that is granted this opportunity. If it's
That's right.
10%.
So they have to do 10%. If they decide to go above and beyond,
All right, so here's the other thing then conceptually, because if everyone's tired, this language is
Yeah.
going to get too much to do. Conceptually is, there's a formula for that based on total development costs. And then that same calculation, your total development costs could apply, that dollar value could apply to your district improvement bonus or your historic preservation bonus.
Right.
So let's say it's $1 million development cost, and you were going to have 5 to 10% have to be affordable. If you applied that to your total development costs, you would say 10% is $100,000, right?
Yeah.
then you'd say, okay, that's the $100,000 is the same you would have to contribute if you're doing if you're seeking a district improvement or you're seeking a historic preservation bonus. Think about that conceptually.
Okay.
I mean, because the language of that would probably need to be something different than
Yeah.
we've got, okay? And then,
I think that's an improvement, because as it was, I was thinking an affordable housing unit would cost so much more than just doing an investment to the wharf area, that I was afraid developers would just go, oh, we'll give 10,000 to the wharf area
Yeah,
rather than
yeah,
spend
yeah.
100,000 on a unit, or for, you know what I mean? So I was thinking it wouldn't, so to make it equal and then to give the planning board the discretion of what we need
Right.
as a town and as a district.
time.
At that time, would be far better than leaving it to the developer to have the discretion.
Yeah.
so then, so that conceptually. And then just another thing to think about is we talked about needing funds to be established, right? So you would need a district improvement fund. And talking with Kevin Freitag, he thought we should set up a language for that, or an article for those funds to go at the same time. So if the select board is open, like they said, to reopening the warrant, we would ask them to add companion articles to set up the funds.
I think we only just need the one fund, or we can talk about this.
We need to talk about
So
it.
we don't need one for the affordable housing, because
that already
that can
exists?
go to
That
the
already
Affordable
exists.
Housing Trust. So we don't need a warrant article for that. We don't technically need an article for the Historic Commission, because they can accept gifts, donations, federal money, state money, all that sort of stuff. They already have the statutory authority for that. So we could say that historic preservation money could go to the Historic Commission. Cheryl's comment is that then we don't have any guarantee that the money that they get gets spent in the district.
In the village, right.
And so, because once it,
That's why I suggest we have a fund that is specific to the village, because we heard from neighbors that they're taking the additional square footage, they should get
I
the
think this is a great
improvement.
idea.
Yeah.
so I'm just
And
saying.
I think we should
just-
hear
yeah.
from the Historic Commission on that,
Great.
beforehand.
I agree with you, because I'm thinking about even other districts, as we move through them,
Yeah.
who's to say any money is going to go back to
Well, that's the
that
thing, the
district?
mitigation should go
To
to
where it
the
is, yeah.
affected area.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree.
So can we finish Alex's comments at our next meeting?
Yeah,
That'd be
so I
nice.
just,
I
I
think
wanted,
I've already closed my
But I
thing.
really
We're done,
like,
aren't we?
I just wanted everyone to have those things to
There's-
think about, because I think those are
Yeah,
kind
no,
of
it's
the bigger things to think about.
I think we're done with Alex's comments.
Could we, well,
There's a couple.
I think it was related to the
Oh,
historic
or that.
district.
Because
These
the
are
historic
all
district, we've
related
already
to
said we
this.
can't
It's related
do.
to that.
And we've also said the design standards are something that can be moved and waived and developed over time, and so
And then signage
Sign
is
sign
sign
is done by
sign.
somebody else.
the the Affordable Housing Committee is working on a
Trust.
formula.
The trust or the housing,
So just a little update on that. I spoke to Melinda today, and the Affordable Housing Trust is not meeting again until the 30th. I would like us to finish our language revisions to the extent we can at our next meeting, the 23rd. We'll try and get feedback from them before they have their meeting, and if we need to, maybe we come up with a formula at our next meeting, we send it to them for feedback instead of waiting for them to provide one. So there's just timing-wise, just quickly.
Yeah.
Because if we have the public hearing on the 13th, and if we need 2 meetings, that is a bit of a challenge in how much language revision we want to wait on, right? Because my understanding is the warrant has to go to press on the 13th of March. The warrant committee needs time to consider the article. So my suggestion is that we finish these things that we know are remaining at our next meeting. And town council is going to work on the 2 companion articles to set up the funds, that we vote those at our next meeting. Because then the select board won't meet again until the 12th, just before our next meeting, after the 23rd. Because unfortunately, their schedule is one day before us.
Yeah.
you know, and so we missed the whole kind of 2 weeks of time in between. So I just kind of want to put those, put that out there in terms of thinking. Yes, Bill?
I have 5 comments from Joe Brundeck.
Can we take those up?
4 of them are really easy, and 1 is going to take enough to think about.
All right, what's the one that needs some time to think about? Just to plant it in our mind, we can think about it.
Under business parking, the sentence read, in the event of a restaurant, in parentheses, without a bar. He goes, what if?
What if a bar? What do you do? Okay.
His other ones are really easy. His
I don't know
others
too
are-
many restaurants that don't have a bar anyway, so.
But
Even like
Yeah, we should know.
Village Rock Taqueria has.
his other one was setbacks. He wants to remove the whole section.
I told Bill that setbacks were something that were discussed with neighbors in the MPIC process, in the visualizations that I did. I'm not comfortable removing
fine.
setbacks
Well, that's the same-
without taking it back
Well,
further.
that's the same discussion about the analysis, like
Yeah.
it's all been done.
Yeah,
So now to change it is a little misleading to all the people that
exactly.
participated.
There's a lot of people who participated, yeah.
We should, yeah.
So, but I do think the restaurant issue and the couple others we can take up next time, right?
I just saw a project approved on Dana Avenue in Hyde Park, transit-oriented development, right next to the Hyde Park commuter station. 24 units, 24 parking spaces. $9 million.
Beside the what?
Hyde Park,
How many affordables?
doesn't say.
How many units?
24
So-
units, 24
we go.
parking
I
spaces.
do think we need to just button up Alex's. There are a few
Yeah, we
left.
can-
And
yeah.
I do think that we should put Alex's comments with all the comments on the website. And Cheryl's updates should go on. We should, so the public can keep up with us.
Aren't they on anyway?
Well,
Well, all these updates that Cheryl did and that we did tonight should go on to the website tomorrow.
The only thing I would say about that is I feel like that, I agree with you, I think everything should be on the website. But I think that if we put every iteration of the zoning on the website,
Nobody's gonna read
it
it.
might get a little confusing.
No, just to update, just
To remove
To replace the old
and
one.
put
Put
the
the
new
new
one.
one
Oh,
on.
that makes sense.
But could you do it in red so they know what's
and make sure it says
changed?
draft
Yeah.
across it, because what
Yes.
we need to have as a standing one, what we've sent to the select board. That needs to be the standing one, because that's been submitted. Then we could say, you know,
This is the working draft.
working draft after that,
Okay.
right?
Thank you,
We
sorry,
need-
I know it's
we
a lot of
need
work, but it's so.
But
I
our
think
working
it's so-
draft
She
should
just sent an
continue to be
email
updated
Rob,
and replaced.
Yeah,
he thinks
okay.
it's important, so-
As opposed to
Good.
like
You
13
like
different
Rob.
working drafts, because I know I've been confused by that.
Right, right.
Oh, you should have made it
Okay,
seem so
can-
hard, I would have been.
Can I make a motion to adjourn?
Yes, second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.